Chapter 25:36. Nest of Thousand Demons. Chapter 25:37. Nest of 1,000 Demons. Boom. The sword might was unparalleled. Although it didn't have the might of an earthly sovereign, it was still filled with immense power. Especially Yi Fei, who had just broken through to the Divine Lord realm. His sword Dao Mystique was even more terrifying. His undying sword soul only needed to ignite a ray of terrifying sword light to surround the 4 divine lords. However, the 4 of them were, after all, elites of the nest of 10,000 demons. They were ordered to step into Sword Mountain, so naturally, they were fully prepared. Vile spawn, what ability do you have to call yourself the king of devils? You should know that my nest of myriad devils, so noisy. Dead people don't need to speak. The whistling sound of the sword tore through the firmament as it slashed at the Divine Lord who had spoken. The Divine Lord immediately sneered as the spiritual augmentation armor on his body glowed brightly in an attempt to block the sword beam. However, the indestructible sword token in Yi Fei's hand suddenly became huge. It was like a sword beam that was hundreds of meters long. It cleaved apart the world and the Divine Lord's body. The spirit augmentation armor that protected the Divine Lord was shattered. That's impossible. What kind of sword is that? It clearly doesn't have any divine powers, but it could easily shatter the spirit augmentation divine armor of our demon palace. The eyes of the remaining 3 Sir Gods were filled with great shock and fear. They wanted to retreat, but Long Guang roared angrily and completely transformed into a primordial Fey dragon, blocking their path. Long Jiaojiao also led the dragon turtle to harass the 3 divine lords from the side. It also bought time for Yi Fei to rush over. Kill. The rumbling sound of the sword, accompanied by a howl, descended upon the 3 Sir Gods once again, scaring them out of their wits. However, they had no choice but to use all their strength to withstand the terrifying sword might. Long Guang took advantage of the opportunity and pushed the Demon Sovereign Sutra to its limit. A gigantic ancient Fey claw slammed over, causing a Divine Lord's body to explode. Following that, another blood-curdling scream came from the 2nd Sir God. Yi Fei's sword beam instantly cleaved the Sir God into 2 halves. A mist of blood floated in the air, making Yi Fei look like the king of demons. He was filled with immense pressure. This time, Yi Fei did not use any divine power. His ancient god golden body had broken through to the Azura realm, giving Yi Fei a terrifying ancient god power. As long as he activated this power, Yi Fei would be able to unleash an attack even more terrifying than a divine ability without using any divine abilities. He was like a true Azura, and the indestructible sword token that he had completely grasped had become Yi Fei's most convenient killing tool. Lord Demon King, please spare me, I'm willing to submit. The last divine lord from the nest of 1,000 demons was so scared that he didn't even dare to move. He allowed the dragon turtle and Long Jiaojiao to surround him. He even knelt down in the air and begged Yi Fei for mercy. Long Jiaojiao looked at him with disdain. Blackie, take off his space belt. Cultivating in Sword Mountain for the past 3 years had consumed a large amount of profound stones and profound veins every day. Not only had Yi Fei and the dragon turtle run out of profound stones and profound veins, but so had Long Guang and his daughter. They were almost out of profound stones as well. Now that there was a chance to plunder, the dragon turtle walked over with great familiarity without needing Long Jiaojiao's order and snatched the Divine Lord's space belt on the spot. Indignation and humiliation immediately appeared in the Divine Lord's eyes. He was a Divine Lord, but he was robbed by a Tao Lord Black Turtle. It was a great humiliation. However, it was the dragon turtle and not Long Jiaojiao who robbed him. This made the Divine Lord even more afraid to act rashly. He only looked at Yi Fei with a pleading expression. Yi Fei was still a little hesitant, but Long Jiaojiao hugged Yi Fei's arm firmly and said, "Brother Yi, look, the dragon turtle went over to rob the Divine Lord. It's clear that this divine lord is still very willing to submit. Roar? Only then did the dragon turtle realize that Long Jiao Jiao had asked it to go over with bad intentions. The dragon turtle's face was as black as a pot and it felt a dull ache in its heart. Yi Fei nodded and looked at the divine lord. He directly ordered, "Answer 2 of my questions. How much do you know about the battle on Demonic Mountain 3 years ago?" Boom. An ancient godlike pressure appeared on Yi Fei's body. Feeling this pressure, the divine lord, who was already frightened, regretted entering Sword Mountain. He shook his head in horror and said, "Demon King, please spare my life. The martial artists of Demonic Mountain and Demonic City are all dead. Other than the ancient emperor, no one knows the details of the battle on Demonic Mountain. However, there are many forces in the Divine Prefecture who are asking about your death." At this moment, the Divine Lord knew who the young man standing in front of him was. It was Yi Fei, the great demon King Yi, who entered Demonic Mountain alone, killed Renzu with a sword, and bullied the Quasi-Emperor with a coffin 3 years ago. "What forces are looking for information about me?" Yi Fei continued to ask without batting an eyelid. "There are the Divine King Palace, the Merak Palace, and the other top 10 forces in the Divine Prefecture. Among them, the Sword Palace and the Deathmatch Palace sent a large number of people into the Demon Province to investigate. The Sword Palace even destroyed the Forbidden Land of Gods and Demons. By the way, the Wind and Cloud Palace also offered a large reward for the news of your death." The Divine Lord told him everything he knew honestly. Yi Fei only knew that there were still many forces in the Divine Prefecture who did not give up looking for him during the 3 years he cultivated in Sword Mountain. Especially the Deathmatch Palace, who sent the most people. Obviously, they were afraid that the Fist of the North Star might be leaked if he died. As for the Wind and Cloud Palace, not only did they send people, they even offered a reward. This made Yi Fei fall into deep thought. After all, when he was in Qing Province, he had an agreement with the Baiyun god of the Wind and Cloud Palace. As long as he was alive, the Wind and Cloud Palace and the Baiyun god were not allowed to set foot in Qing Province. This agreement was witnessed by the Merak Palace, and the Wind and Cloud Palace also agreed. There was no way to deny it. However, if he really died in the Demon Province, then the agreement between him and the Wind and Cloud Palace would be null and void. At that time, the Wind and Cloud Palace and the Baiyun god would have sufficient reason to invade Qing Province and regain control of Qing Province and the Baiyun nation. When he thought of this possibility, Yi Fei's face suddenly turned cold. The Divine Lord who replied stood up in fear and said, "Lord Demon King, I have said everything that needs to be said. I am willing to submit to you. I only ask that you spare my life." "Submit? Sure. You just need to tell me how many babies you sacrificed to break through to your current realm." Yi Fei's face showed a very simple and honest smile. This honest smile was very infectious. The Divine Lord subconsciously recalled, "Since my breakthrough, I have sacrificed at least 8,000 babies, if not 10,000. Lord Demon King, could it be that you are also interested in the myriad devil nests life sacrifice technique?" The Divine Lord looked at Yi Fei fawningly, but he was puzzled to find that Yi Fei's smile had completely turned cold the moment he heard his words. The Divine Lord suddenly reacted, "Oh no, this brat is tricking me. Yes, I am tricking you." Boom. Just as the Divine Lord retreated in fear, Yi Fei raised his sword again. The 100-meter-long black gold divine sword whistled through the air and instantly chopped the Divine Lord into pieces from head to toe. Long Jiao Jiao said angrily, 3 years ago, when the earthly sovereign killed these scum, I still felt that it was cruel. Now, after hearing the Divine Lord's words, I only feel that killing them is letting them off too easily. It's fine. There should be a large number of myriad Devil Nest disciples guarding outside Sword Mountain. As long as we kill our way out, we will definitely be able to kill to our heart's content. It can also be considered as revenge for those who died innocently. Chapter 25:37. Lu Henmo. Outside of Sword Mountain, there was still no human ancestor. There were only 2 divine lords and dozens of Downlord-level disciples of the nest of myriad demons. Not only were they responsible for guarding Sword Mountain, they were also responsible for supervising the slaves and mining the sword stones. The so-called sword stones had been affected by the sword aura in the past 3 years. Many of the rocks had changed. These rocks had absorbed the sword aura and gradually turned from ordinary rocks into strange sword stones that contained a large amount of sword aura. As long as they were polished, they would become natural divine swords. If they were engraved with divine patterns, their power would be comparable to divine weapons. It was also for this reason that many forces outside Sword Mountain had gone crazy 3 years ago to fight for control of this place. In the end, the lair of myriad demons was stronger. At the cost of 1 Rinzu, they not only occupied this place, but also captured a large number of martial artists to be in charge of mining. Seeing this scene, Yi Fei was secretly amused. He could not help but feel a greater desire to kill and anger towards the lair of myriad demons. Not only did they sacrifice babies, but they also forced others to become slaves. It seems that the lair of myriad demons has a lot of resentment in this area. Yi Fei thought of something. He dragged his divine sword and walked towards Sword Mountain step by step. Behind him, Long Guang and Long Jiaojiao were puzzled. What did the lair of myriad demons have to do with them? Now, Long Guang and Long Jiaojiao only wanted to return to Divine Devil City as soon as possible to see how the dragon tribe was doing. Only the dragon turtle vaguely understood Yi Fei's plan. The dragon turtle was inexplicably excited. Before Yi Fei could do anything, it roared angrily and spat out a demonic wind. This demonic wind carried a paralyzing poisonous fog. A few of the lair of myriad demons' disciples nearby did not understand what was going on. As soon as the poisonous wind passed, their faces turned green and they fell to the ground stiffly. What's going on? Why did a turtle and 3 strangers come out of Sword Mountain? The 2 divine lords guarding Sword Mountain were alarmed. They scattered the poisonous fog in the air and rushed over. However, before they could reach Yi Fei, Long Guang and Long Jiaojiao had already transformed into immemorial demon dragons. Dragon flames surged like lightning towards one of the divine lords. Boom! Another terrifying divine sword, hundreds of meters long, sliced through the world and instantly smashed another nest of myriad demons' divine lord into a meat patty from head to toe. Yi Fei frowned and shook his head. There were many divine lords in the nest of myriad demons, but the majority of them relied on external strength. They borrowed the life sacrifices of the demonic path to avoid a great life or death calamity and break into the divine lord realm. It could be said that these were the weakest Sir God. They were so weak that Yi Fei, who was at the same level, could kill them with a single strike. On the other side, Long Guang and Long Jiaojiao worked together to quickly kill another divine lord. Heavens, just who are they? They actually managed to kill a divine lord in 2 moves. The remaining disciples of the nest of myriad demons were in a state of chaos. They didn't even have time to guard the slaves. All they wished was that they could grow 2 more legs so they could run faster. At this time, another resplendent sword light transformed into a terrifying sea of blood. It enveloped the disciples of the nest of myriad demons and all the martial artist slaves around Sword Mountain. Boundless sword chi of death instantly pierced through the disciples' heavenly palaces and souls. It even shattered the spiritual shackles on the martial artist slave. From now on, you are free. Leave, Yi Fei said calmly. But many of the rescued martial artists had blank expressions. When they were captured and brought here, they had already lost all hope for the future. They were nothing more than walking corpses mining ores. Who would have thought that they would one day regain their freedom? The slave martial artists below the Lord of Heaven all cried loudly as they quickly escaped from this nightmarish Sword Mountain. But there were also a dozen or so Tao Lord Realm slave martial artists who didn't leave. They even discussed for a while before silently kneeling before Yi Fei. Yi Fei couldn't help but feel puzzled. Long Guang even shouted in a deep voice, "Why aren't you leaving? Why are you kneeling?" "Seniors, we want to leave, but we can't. We are all hostages sent by our clans. We were brought here by the nest of myriad demons to suffer. If we escape, the nest of myriad demons will definitely destroy our clans. So if Senior really wants to save us, please slaughter the nest of myriad demons. We are also willing to follow you everywhere and serve Senior." With that, these Dao lords solemnly kowtowed to Yi Fei. Some even swore on their demonic souls on the spot. This was the highest oath a demonic Dao martial artist could make. Very few demonic Dao martial artists dared to go against it. This was because once they did, they would be invaded by inner demons and affect their future cultivation. Long Guang also said in a low voice, "I know the clans around the nest of myriad demons. They are all slaves of the nest of myriad demons. Not only are they cannon fodder in battle, but they are also responsible for sacrificing infants for the nest of myriad demons. Their fates are very miserable. However, the nest of myriad demons is a demonic palace after all. They even have a quasi-emperor overseeing it and a large number of Renzu. Senior, you're talking about the nest of myriad demons from 3 years ago. You might not know this, but 3 years ago, a large number of Renzu from the nest of myriad demons went to the demonic mountain to fight for the emperor's coffin. In the end, they all died. When the Sword Mountain appeared, the quasi-emperor of the nest of myriad demons personally came to investigate and lost another Renzu. Even the quasi-emperor himself was severely injured and on the verge of death. Otherwise, the nest of myriad demons wouldn't have detained the clan leaders of our clans here and wanted to force us to sacrifice 3,000 young boys and girls to heal the old demon's injuries. Among the kneeling people, a middle-aged man with a dignified face raised his head and said, "Just now, he was the one who had contacted his companions and knelt together to ask for help." Yi Fei couldn't help but feel a little curious about this person. He asked, "Who are you?" "I'm Lu Henmo, the clan leader of the Lu clan near the nest of myriad demons. Of course, although we're called clan leaders, we're actually just livestock slaves of the nest of myriad demons. All the talented children and beautiful women in our clan have been captured by the nest of myriad demons, tortured and sacrificed. As a result, among the 10,000 people in our clan, the strongest are only a few of us, who are early-stage Dao lords. It's the same for the other clans." Hearing Lu Henmo's words, the other clan leaders all looked miserable. They said hatefully, "We can't live like this anymore. We only ask the 3 seniors to help us uphold justice. As long as the nest of myriad demons can be destroyed, we're willing to lead our clans to swear a blood oath. From then on, we'll be loyal to you forever and never betray you." Dong dong dong. Lu Henmo took the lead and kowtowed to Yi Fei. They could see that not only was Yi Fei's combat strength terrifying, but he was also the leader. Yi Fei didn't refuse these people to swear a blood oath. After experiencing the tragic battle between the Crimson Moon Divine Dynasty and the Demonic Mountain, Yi Fei already knew how helpful it was to have a powerful force behind him. This way, not only would he be able to obtain a large amount of cultivation resources, but he wouldn't have to fight alone when faced with the pursuit of other forces. Moreover, the fact that the Stormy Palace was inquiring about his death had always made Yi Fei worried. He was worried that the Stormy Palace would take the opportunity to attack Qingzhou. Since that was the case, why didn't he gather a group of people in the Demon Continent and establish a great force that belonged only to him? Chapter 2538. To show one's prowess, since I'm going to establish my own organization, I'm not just going to need to subjugate a large number of Lord of Heaven and Dao Lords. I'm going to need to gather enough high-level combatants, such as the Divine Lord and Renzu. It's not enough to have Renzu in the Green Prefecture. We also need immortal emperors like Long Guang and Pan Wang. Furthermore, my ancient god golden body has already broken through to the Azura realm. I can use the ancient god's secret technique to seize the bloodline of others and create the true bodies of my loved ones. Yi Fei did not forget that his brothers like Yi Shanshan, Yi Shaochan, Luo Xie, and Xia Jun, as well as his friends like Jing Wushou, Lin Tianjiao, and the Army of Destruction, Dongfang Yu, did not have strong martial artist bloodlines. This would severely affect their martial path. Since he had decided to return to Qingzhou, he naturally had to bring back sufficient gift. And the nest of 1,000 devils was undoubtedly the best gift. Are you sure that the quasi-emperor of the nest of 10,000 demons is seriously injured and on the verge of death? Yi Fei stared at Lu Henmo sternly. I swear on my life, that old devil really can't hold on any longer. His true body has already been sealed and placed on the altar in the nest of 1,000 devils, waiting for the sacrifice of 3,000 children. That altar was also built by us. Senior, if you don't believe me, you can search my soul and look through my memories. Lu Henmo's eyes flashed with shocking hatred and determination. That hatred even moved Yi Fei. However, thinking about it, it made sense. Not only had their entire clan been reduced to livestock slaves in the nest of myriad demons, they had even been forced to sacrifice their clan's infants to the nest of myriad demons every year. Such hatred would never disappear. Yi Fei had already started to believe that Lu Henmo and his group were really impatient to annihilate the nest of 1,000 devils. But even if he believed it, this was a serious matter. Yi Fei would not take the risk so easily. He looked at Long Guang. Long Guang immediately made his move. He grabbed Lu Henmo's head and used a secret technique of the Devil Dao to forcefully search his soul. Lu Henmo did not resist. His face was filled with hatred as he allowed Long Guang to search through his memories. What he said is true. Indeed, Renzu from Nest of Myriad Demons suffered a great loss in the battle on Demonic Mountain. Currently, there is only one Renzu in Myriad Demons Mountain. The 1,000 Caves old demon is severely injured and has sealed himself. He has lost the ability to fight. Long Guang put down his hand and nodded at Yi Fei. Lu Henmo was sweating profusely. It was not a good feeling to have someone go through his memories. Yi Fei didn't say much. His experience on Demonic Mountain had taught him that when he was cold, he had to be cold. The nest of myriad devils had committed all sorts of evil deeds. Back then, the earthly sovereign's heroic spirit didn't have the time to deal with them. Thus, he would replace the earthly sovereign and exterminate this evil devil palace. Lu Henmo, get up. From now on, I accept your loyalty. Now, go back immediately and gather all those who are willing to take revenge on the nest of 1,000 devils. Remember, I will only give you 3 days. If you don't come in 3 days, I will leave. After saying that, Yi Fei walked towards a mountain peak and sat cross-legged on it. This was actually a test. If these people came as promised, he would accept their strength. If they just wanted to use him to deal with the nest of 1,000 devils, he wouldn't fall for it so easily. Master, don't worry. As long as you can exterminate the nest of 1,000 devils, I, Lu Henmo, am willing to lead my entire clan to battle. Master, I don't need 3 days. In 2 days at most, I will lead my entire clan here. We are not the only ones who hate the nest of 1,000 devils. I have a few good friends whose clans were exterminated by the nest of 1,000 devils. They dream of revenge even in their dreams. This old servant will go and invite all of them here. These clans were filled with hatred and left one after another. Long Guang couldn't help but be worried. Yi Fei, Lu Henmo hates the nest of 1,000 devils to the bone. You can trust him. But the others didn't do a soul search. Uncle Long, don't doubt the people you use. I have already decided to build a force that won't lose to the heavenly palace of despair. If I have to perform a soul search on anyone who joins me, how can I unite the hearts of the people? How can I destroy the other 10 forces and even take over the entire Crimson Moon Divine Dynasty? Yi Fei said calmly. But when Long Guang and his daughter heard it, they were shocked. Yi Fei had such ambitions. He wanted to conquer the other 10 forces, suppress the Crimson Moon Divine Dynasty, and become the new overlord of the Divine Prefecture? Good. Yi Fei, since you have such ambitions, I, a half-dragon, will be the vanguard. Long Guang was also inspired. Long Jiaojiao's eyes were shining. She felt that the domineering brother Yi was really handsome. After sending Lu Henmo and the others away, Yi Fei didn't stay idle. He ordered the dragon turtle to dig out all the remaining sword stones around the Sword Mountain. Long Guang and Long Jiaojiao also helped to remove the impurities in these sword stones, forming nearly 10,000 natural divine swords. Then Yi Fei walked into the Sword Mountain alone with these divine swords. He asked Xiao Chao to attach spirit to all these divine swords. Since he had killed a monarch god and obtained a large number of Xian veins, Xiao Chao was full of energy. The tricolored divine light transformed into the 5-colored divine light, which also made Xiao Chao's ability to attach spirit even more terrifying. It was difficult for other spirit adhesives to complete the attachment, but Xiao Chao only needed to wave his hand and the 5-colored divine light automatically evolved into divine runes. They were like natural imprints that merged into the stone swords. This also showed Yi Fei the most terrifying side of the Spirit Immortal clan. That was the mass production of divine weapons. A Spirit Immortal clan member was a powerful workshop that refined divine weapons. He was like a human-shaped war machine. 3 days later, Lu Henmo also came as promised. He brought hundreds of Lord of Heaven and 7 hidden Tao lords to the Sword Mountain again. The other family heads also came one after another. Not only did no one escape or report, but the number of family heads that came increased by 3. Among them, there were also many wandering Lord of Heaven and Tao lords. Master, we all have a deep hatred for the nest of 1,000 devils. As long as Master can defeat Renzu of the nest of 1,000 devils, we are all willing to die. We would rather die than be a demon's slave. We would rather die. We would rather die. Close to 10,000 Lord of Heaven and hundreds of Tao lords roared together. This was a force that could not be underestimated. Even Long Guang and Long Jiaojiao were a little moved. Yi Fei did not stand on ceremony and ordered coldly, "Since you have joined my sect, you should listen to my orders. Uncle Long, you are in charge of all the Tao lords. Long Jiaojiao, you are in charge of all the Lord of Heaven. Blackie, give them the weapons." Roar. The dragon turtle opened its mouth and spat out countless stone swords that were already inscribed with divine runes. Looking at the shocked expressions of countless people, Lu Henmo was so excited that his body trembled. This time, I finally made the right bet. We finally have hope for revenge. Master, don't worry. As long as I, Lu Henmo, don't die this time, my life and the lives of my descendants will all be yours. I don't want your life. I just want you to live and work for me. Yi Fei patted Lu Henmo's shoulder heavily. Under the respectful gazes of countless people, he raised the indestructible sword token in his hand. Now I give the order. Send out the troops and destroy the nest of 1,000 devils. Send out the troops and kill the demons. Boom. Chapter 2539. Ancestor Tian Henlu Henmo and the others were laborers of the nest of 1,000 devils. To them, there were no secrets in the nest of 1,000 devils. Master, look. The nest of 1,000 devils is right in front of us. If we want to enter, we will have to break through the protective array of the nest of 1,000 devils. Let me be so bold as to ask Master to only bring a few people and pretend to be prisoners. We will sneak into the nest of 1,000 devils and kill the Sir God, who is the key to activating the protective array. After that, we will charge in and wipe out the nest of 1,000 devils. Lu Henmo suggested. Yi Fei nodded. All right. Heads of families, follow me. Uncle Long, you and I will pretend to be the Sir Gods of the nest of 1,000 devils, As he spoke, Yi Fei had already put on the phantom mask and changed into the appearance of one of the immortal lords of the nest of myriad demons. Lu Henmo and the others, on the other hand, turned into Dao lords who were following behind Yi Fei, purposely escorting a few family heads. Long Jiao led a large group of people and stayed at the back. She would command the remaining Lord of Heaven and Dao lords of these families to surround the nest of thousand devils and ensure that no one would be able to escape. Stop! What are you doing? The disciples guarding the entrance of the nest of thousand devils were on high alert. Although they did not know about the rebellion in Jian Mountain, in the past 3 years, a large number of Renzu had died in the nest of thousand devils. Even the ancestor of the nest of thousand caves was severely injured and sealed. The security of the nest of thousand devils had become much stricter. Both people entering and exiting the nest of thousand devils were entering and exiting the nest of thousand devils. However, Lu Henmo was too familiar with this kind of interrogation. Before Yi Fei could say anything, Lu Henmo had already walked up and shouted angrily. "Are you guys out of your minds? The one who returned is Sir God Tian Can. How dare you guys stop him? Hurry up and ask Sir God Tian Can to come over. Something big has happened in Jian Mountain." What? Jian Mountain? The disciples guarding the nest of thousand devils were shocked. Although Lu Henmo looked unfamiliar, they still recognized Sir God Tian Can after Yi Fei disguised himself. Since this matter was related to Jian Mountain, the disciples did not dare to delay and quickly ran to inform Sir God Tian Can. At the same time, Sir God Tian Can was an evil array cultivator. He was proficient in various arrays. He was the key in controlling the nest of thousand devils arrays. Sir God Tian Can. Sir God Tian Can and... He walked out easily. Sir Tian Xiong's expression changed when he saw Yi Fei. "No, you are not Tian Can. You are in disguise." Although the phantom mask could change one's appearance, it was only effective against those below the Dao Lord level. Sir God Tian Can could easily see through it. Sensing that something was wrong, Sir God Tian Can wanted to retreat. Just as he was retreating, a pair of gigantic azure dragon flaming wings suddenly unfurled from Yi Fei's back. His entire body left behind afterimages as he suddenly appeared in front of Divine Lord Tian Xiong. Divine Lord Tian Xiong roared angrily. As he formed a seal with both hands, he immediately used himself as the core of the array to activate the various evil arrays in the nest of myriad demons in an attempt to force Yi Fei to retreat. At that moment, a gigantic sword beam slashed through the heavens and earth, bringing with it boundless ancient god power as it shattered Divine Lord Tian Xiong's protective array. The entire nest of 10,000 demons reverberated with the roar of the sword. Sir God Tian Xiong's celestial palace collapsed and his spiritual soul was shattered. He fell in front of Yi Fei. At that moment Yi Fei took off the phantom mask. The huge sword light with the aura of death swept forward again. Countless nest of 10,000 demons' disciples were killed. Yi Fei had no sympathy for these disciples. After all, the disciples of the nest of thousand devils practiced the sacrificial technique of the thousand caves old demon. It was evil and cruel. Yi Fei did not need to show any mercy to them. The eyes of Lu Henmo and the others turned red as they charged forward without any regard for their lives. They fought with the disciples of the nest of thousand devils. Long Jiao, who had heard the commotion outside, did not hesitate to order the army to charge forward. The disciples and elders of the nest of thousand devils were instantly thrown into chaos. More Sir Gods emerged from the depths of the palace. The leader was a powerful middle-aged man, Renzu. Lu Henmo's expression turned serious when he saw Renzu. He shouted, "Master, be careful. He is the disciple of the Thousand Caves old demon, Patriarch Tian Hen." "Lu Henmo, it's actually you lowly slaves who have the guts to rebel. And you only brought 2 Sir Gods with you. Which demonic palace are you from? Do you know the consequences of angering my master?" Human ancestor Tian Hen's expression changed. Ever since the Thousand Cave Patriarch was severely injured, he had been carefully sealing off the mountain. He was afraid that the other forces from the Demon Palace would take the opportunity to take over the mountain. But in the end, not only did the Demon Palace not come, they came with a group of rebels. Instantly, a terrifying demonic aura exploded from old Demon Tianhen's body, causing Lu Henmo and the others to spurt out blood as they retreated. Their faces were filled with nervousness and shock as they looked at the figure in front of them. If they wanted to take revenge on the nest of 1,000 devils, they couldn't just rely on courage. The most important thing was to have strong combat strength, and Yi Fei was the key to their revenge. If Yi Fei won, they would have a chance to take revenge. If Tian Hen Renzu won, they would all be wiped out. In an instant, all eyes were on Yi Fei. Renzu's gaze was the same. You must be the one who instigated these slaves to rebel. Well done. No matter which demonic palace you're from, you're going to die today. Kill. Smile of Thousand Caves red. Renzu suddenly turned into a ghost face. Behind the ghost face there were countless babies. These were the ghost babies that he had refined over the years. Not only were they bloody, but they were also cruel. Once a cultivator was entangled by the ghost babies, not only would their blood be sucked dry, even their soul would be devoured by the ghost babies. However, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Yi Fei allowed the ghost babies to pounce on his body. At the same time, the purple-gold ancient god light on his body burned like a star. Yi Fei raised his hand and raised his sword. The undying sword token immediately turned into a 100-meter-long divine sword that slashed the void and shattered the stars. Yi Fei actually ignored the ghost child and directly attacked the Tian Hen's group. Golden body of despair and a sword. This is impossible. You should have died in the demonic mountain 3 years ago. You're still alive and you dare to seek trouble with my nest of 1,000 devils? Die. Renzu recognized Yi Fei's identity. He immediately turned into a ghost face and spat out more ghost babies. They whimpered and roared as they tore through the void. Yi Fei's expression turned cold. Before the radiance of the deity Tribulation Blood Sword disappeared, a terrifying ghost cauldron appeared behind him. As Yi Fei broke through to the Divine Lord realm, the power of the ghost cauldron became even more terrifying. Rumble! In the void, a ghost cauldron roared and suppressed all the ghost babies. Chapter 2540. Azura Bloodshed. I can't accept this. Ancestor Tian Hen let out an aggrieved and furious roar. Ever since he became the ancestor of the nest of 1,000 devils, he had always been high and mighty. There had never been a divine lord who dared to face him directly, let alone a heaven-defying battle. Unfortunately, he was facing the number 1 on the Earth Carnage ranking Yi Fei. The Azura Realm's ancient god Golden Body could withstand Renzu's attack and wouldn't shatter in a short period of time. The Ghost Emperor Cauldron formed by the power of the Ghost God could even unleash an attack comparable to Renzu. Although Yi Fei wasn't Renzu yet, he already had the strength and confidence to fight against Renzu. This was the strength of a bloodline cultivator. The stronger the bloodline cultivator was, the more they could fight against those with higher cultivation realms. They could also suppress the bloodline cultivators with lower cultivation realms. For example, right now, Yi Fei's earthly sovereign bloodline was rank 10. Furthermore, due to the fact that it was sealed, his bloodline grade could still be increased. On the other hand, the human ancestor Tian Hen's bloodline was only rank 7. Even with the guidance of the Quasi-Emperor, Ancestor Tian Hen managed to break through to the human ancestor realm. However, the nest of 10,000 devils breakthrough was a little special. They didn't rely on their own strength to break through. Instead, they were similar to sorcerers. They walked the path of sacrifice and borrowed the power of heaven and earth. This method allowed the nest of 10,000 devils to create a large number of god lords and Renzu in a short period of time. Unfortunately, these god lords and Renzu were of the same cultivation realm. They were the weakest existences. It was also because of this that Yi Fei didn't hold back and attacked Ancestor Tianhen directly. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor Cauldron turned into a dark star. It was dark and gloomy. It was like the fist of the Grim Reaper as it punched towards the void. Ancestor Tianhen instantly felt incomparably terrified. The void around him instantly crumbled. His protective dark force was also crumbling. Immense rage and fear caused Ancestor Tianhen to let out a ghost-like roar. Following his roar, a peculiar vortex was formed in the air. Countless ghost infants screamed miserably as they were sucked into Ancestor Tianhen's mouth. Ghost King's Wrath. Ancestor Tianhen's ghost king-like roar came from the void. The heavens and earth were covered by the howling ghost chi. It didn't only God Lord Devil Tianhen's wrath, it was Ghost King's Tianhen's Ghost King's wrath. The Ghost King's wrath. The Ghost Wrath Wrath. The Ghost Wrath Ghost Wrath. The Wrath Ghost Wrath 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 Wrath. Wrath Wrath Wrath. Wrath 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 Wrath. However, in the darkness, a ghostly hand with a bloody glow grabbed towards Yi Fei's throat. The strange thing was that the forces that were watching the battle couldn't see the ghostly fog. They were horrified to see Yi Fei suddenly become motionless when facing Ancestor Tianhen's attack. He actually allowed Ancestor Tianhen's ghostly claw to grab his throat. Could it be that I, Lu Henmo, have made a wrong bet this time? This person isn't from the other demon palaces, and he doesn't have the ability to fight against Ancestor Tianhen? Lu Henmo's heart trembled. Some of the other families couldn't help but retreat. Some of the family heads were already regretting that they couldn't stand the bullying and rebelled with Lu Henmo. It's over. Once young Master Yi dies, what awaits us is the annihilation of our entire family. A family head sighed pessimistically. Suddenly, a dragon's roar interrupted these people's words. All of you, shut up. Brother Yi will be fine. He's a natural-born king. Boom. As if to prove Long Jiaojiao's words, just as the ghostly claw was about to grab Yi Fei's throat, a soft "ee" sound came from Yi Fei's body. Just as everyone was still trying to figure out what was going on with that "ee," the seemingly motionless Yi Fei suddenly let out a furious roar. The ghost god cauldron in his left hand and the black gold divine sword in his right hand smashed towards a certain direction in the darkness. Ancestor Tianhen's fearful roar could be heard from that direction. Impossible! You didn't use any special ability. How could you break through my heavenly ghost fog, rumble? As he spoke, Ancestor Tianhen wanted to use the fog to change his position. Unfortunately, no matter how he changed his position, he couldn't escape from Xiao Chao's universal divine eye, nor could he escape from the ghost deity cauldron and the indestructible sword token. With Yi Fei's current strength, he couldn't unleash the full power of the ghost deity cauldron and the indestructible sword token. However, when Yi Fei's ghost deity cauldron landed, Ancestor Tianhen let out a blood-curdling scream. His entire body was injured by the horrifying power of the ghost deity, causing him to spit out blood. Then, a horrifying blood-red sword radiance with the aura of slaughter and death instantly pierced through his throat. Ancestor Tianhen's eyes widened. Before his stiff corpse fell from the sky, Yi Fei had already grabbed hold of Ancestor Tianhen's corpse. He said coldly, "Rank 7 Ghost King bloodline? Not bad. I'll use you to test the power of the Azura secret technique. In the name of Azura, I'll take your bloodline." A series of ancient and obscure voices came out from Yi Fei's mouth. He executed the Azura secret technique and forcefully took away Ancestor Tianhen's Ghost King bloodline, condensing it into a blood-red bead. This bead was called the Azura blood bead. As long as the blood bead was refined, it would allow a martial artist to possess the bloodline condensed from the Azura blood bead. The ancient secret technique that Yi Fei mastered was also called the Azura blood refining technique. This isn't enough. There are too many people in the family Yi who don't have a bloodline. I need more bloodlines to strengthen the family Yi and strengthen the entire land. Bloodlines, I want to take them. Yi Fei's cold voice resounded in the sky. He wouldn't show any mercy to evil sects that had lost their humanity. After killing Tianhen and Renzu, he immediately rushed towards the remaining Sir Gods from the nest of myriad devils. Among these Sir Gods, there were a few geniuses with rank 7 bloodlines. They should be Ancestor Tianhen's disciples. Since he had already decided to destroy the nest of myriad devils, Yi Fei wouldn't spare a single one of these people. Lu Henmo and the others even let out thunderous cheers. After the human ancestor died in battle, the eyes of these major powers all turned red. Many of them would rather die together with the disciples of the nest of myriad devils than to spare their enemies. After killing another 2 rank 7 Sir Gods from the nest of myriad devils, Yi Fei stopped attacking. He left the remaining enemies to Long Guang, Lu Henmo and the others. He then walked towards the palace in the deepest part of the nest of myriad devils. That was the place where the Quasi-Emperor Thousand Cave Patriarch was sealed. But when Yi Fei arrived, the altar where the Thousand Cave Patriarch was sealed was already filled with corpses. Many of these corpses still had blood on them, and the skeletons were very small. It's a life sacrifice. In order to save the Thousand Cave Patriarch, the nest of myriad devils must have captured many babies and held a life sacrifice. The Thousand Cave Patriarch might wake up at any time. Lu Henmo was covered in blood. He rushed in from the outside. Then, he looked up at the altar and let out a cry of shock and fear. Chapter 2541. Thousand Caves Old Demon. The Thousand Caves Old Demon had a good plan. He sealed himself to avoid death, and used the 3,000 children as a sacrifice to borrow the power of heaven and earth to heal the sword wound caused by the earthly emperor's spirit. If the Thousand Caves Old Demon could really achieve his goal, not only would the nest of myriad demons be saved, they would also be able to nurture a new Lord of Gods and Renzu, restoring the might of the nest of myriad demons. The only thing that the Thousand Caves Old Demon didn't expect was that Yi Fei could control the cauldron of ghosts and kill his disciple, old ancestor Tianhen, as a monarch god. And with the death of Renzu and a large number of monarch gods, the destruction of the Thousand Caves Old Demon was inevitable. Of course, for a quasi-emperor like the Thousand Cave Old Ancestor, he could build another demonic palace anytime he wanted if he knew that the Thousand Cave Old Ancestor was still alive. Unfortunately, the Thousand Cave Old Ancestor was too heavily injured this time. He was in the process of sealing himself, so he couldn't react fast enough to quell the chaos. Yi Fei seized the opportunity when the Thousand Cave Old Demon was at his weakest. The indestructible sword token turned into a 100-meter-tall sword mountain. This sword mountain could tear apart heaven and earth, and could even shatter the galaxy. A mere demonic Tao altar was unable to stop the destruction of the imperishable sword token. The black golden divine sword pierced through the middle of the altar, cutting off the energy of heaven and earth that old devil Wanma had sacrificed himself to obtain. At the same time, the indestructible sword token swallowed and refined the energy of heaven and earth, continuously strengthening the profound energy that Yi Fei consumed. Roar! Even though he was sealed, the Thousand Cave Old Demon could still sense the danger. He also sensed Yi Fei's deep malice. Yi Fei wasn't trying to kill him, but to suck him dry. It would be fine if it was Renzu who did this, but Yi Fei was just a monarch god. The Thousand Caves Old Demon was so angry that he let out a demonic roar. In an instant, the demonic sound vibrated in all directions, causing the void to tremble violently. This was the might of a quasi-emperor. If it weren't for the fact that Yi Fei had the cauldron of the ghost deity, which allowed him to fight against Renzu and his ancient god Golden Body, which could block Renzu's attacks to a certain extent, he wouldn't have dared to risk fighting against Patriarch Tianhen, nor would he have dared to come alone and face the Thousand Cave Old Demon, a quasi-emperor. Hearing this demonic sound, Lu Henmo, who was following behind, vomited blood and fainted before he could even make a sound. Yi Fei felt his blood boil in the face of this quasi-emperor's might. He hurriedly took out the divine ghost cauldron. The divine ghost cauldron released the 9 underworlds light and formed the divine ghost door. A purplish golden light emanated from Yi Fei's body, forming an azura armor that completely protected him. Boom! The rolling might of the quasi-emperor was like a wild beast roaring at Yi Fei. Yi Fei roared as though he was standing in the turbulent river of Jianghu, unmoving like a mountain and indestructible like a sword. You can actually block the might of a quasi-emperor. And that sword, is it the sword from the Sword Mountain? The 1,000-cave-old demon seemed to be asking, but he had already confirmed it. Realizing that the might of a quasi-emperor alone couldn't force Yi Fei to retreat, the whimpering of countless children could be heard in the air. On the altar, the body of the 1,000-cave-old demon, which was originally sealed, was covered in blood. Countless tiny worms crawled out of the coffin. The moment they flew out of the coffin, the worms grew in size and turned into strange monsters with the faces of babies. Children, kill these traitors for this emperor! The 1,000-cave-old demon's angry roar resounded in the air. The monsters with the faces of babies turned green and had fangs, looking extremely ferocious. The sky was filled with ghostly shadows. Not only did they want to attack Yi Fei, they also wanted to fly out and kill the traitors. Furthermore, each of these monsters possessed the offensive strength of a divine lord. When hundreds of these monsters charged at him, that feeling made even the human ancestor tremble in fear. Yi Fei didn't know that if the 1,000-cave-old demon was in his peak state, the monsters released by him wouldn't be monarch gods, but Renzu. Just by relying on these monsters, the 1,000-cave-old demon was enough to make many forces wary. Unfortunately, Yi Fei didn't know about this. He didn't have the fear of a quasi-emperor. Instead, he had the sharpness and killing intent of a newborn calf that wasn't afraid of a tiger. Kill! The inextinguishable sword spirit turned into a sword fire, shining behind Yi Fei like a pillar of light. Then, Yi Fei grabbed the pillar of sword fire with one hand and slashed it forward. The destructive sword qi immediately tore apart the corpse worms and ghost infants that were diving towards him. At the same time, an even stronger light emerged from the divine ghost cauldron. The 6 paths heavenly cauldron suppressed the surroundings with the power of reincarnation. Suddenly, Lin Fan threw out another terrifying punch. It turned into a 7-star radiance and covered the entire space of the altar. God knows how many corpse worms and ghost babies lost their ghostly aura after being hit by the gate of ghosts and gods. They turned into shriveled corpse worms and fell to the ground. The 1,000-cave-old demon was shocked. You are cultivating the Tao of the gods, which is even more powerful than my Tao of the Ghost King. Ah, my luck is here. I can't even stop it. With your ghostly Tao, what use do I have for this heavily injured body? I'll transform into a ghostly king and devour you. Then, I'll grasp the true ghostly Tao. Roar. The 1,000-cave-old demon's last bit of human qi disappeared. All that was left was ghostly qi. At the same time, a divine soul with thick ghostly qi rushed out from his sealed body. It roared towards the sky, and the rest of the worms heard its command and turned into shrieking babies. They were devoured by the divine soul of the 1,000-cave-old demon. As the divine soul devoured them, a terrifying aura of the Ghost King was emitted. The entire palace looked like a ghost town. Only now did Yi Fei realize that he had underestimated the quasi-emperor. Even though the 1,000-cave-old demon had been severely injured by the earthly emperor's spirit and lost most of his strength, the Ghost King divine soul that the 1,000-cave-old demon had cultivated was still terrifying. At the same time, Yi Fei felt uneasy. I can't let the 1,000-cave-old demon devour these ghostly babies. Otherwise, his divine soul will turn into a ghost king. I will miss the only chance to kill this quasi-emperor. Xiao Qiao, come out and do your work. At this critical moment, Yi Fei couldn't care less about Xiao Qiao's fear of ghosts. He quickly pulled Xiao Qiao out of the beast mark space. Surprisingly, Xiao Qiao wasn't angry or afraid. The moment she was pulled out, Xiao Qiao was already standing on the dragon tortoise. She held her head high and raised the deity-beating whip, lashing it at the Thousand Caves geezer's godly soul. Clang! At the critical moment, the Thousand Cave old demon's godly soul unleashed a strange ghost shield and blocked the attack of the deity whipping whip. Yi Fei and the dragon tortoise were shocked. Xiao Qiao had always been able to crush godly souls. Why did she miss this time? Yi Fei couldn't help but feel nervous. He thought that a dying quasi-emperor would be easy to deal with. But now, it seemed that he was too naive. Xiao Qiao, let's retreat. Xiao Qiao shook his head, indicating that he was very angry. At the same time, Xiao Qiao changed his fear of ghosts. Seeing that the deity-beating whip was blocked, Xiao Qiao immediately waved his hand and unleashed a terrifying five-fold light. Not only did it penetrate the Thousand Cave old demon's ghostly shield, it even penetrated his divine soul. Chapter 2542. The Fall of a Quasi-Emperor. Xiao Qiao went all out. He no longer used only one hand to release divine light. Instead, he used both hands to release the five-colored divine light. The divine light formed into light pillars that pierced through the Thousand Cave old demon's divine soul. The Thousand Cave old demon was dumbfounded. He was, after all, a quasi-emperor. Even though he was on the verge of death and could no longer use his magical powers, his spirit was still powerful. At the critical moment, he could even completely abandon his human body and transform into a ghost king malicious spirit. He still had a chance to kill Yi Fei. Unfortunately, he met Xiao Qiao, who specialized in restraining divine souls. The god-beating whip was still fine as it could gather ghostly qi to block the divine light. But the five-colored divine light released by Xiao Qiao was too terrifying. It pierced through the ghostly qi and injured his divine soul. This made the Thousand Cave old demon even more injured. He didn't even have time to devour the remaining ghost babies. A sharp demonic howl could be heard. The nearby ghost babies suddenly changed their direction. They were no longer devoured by the Thousand Cave old demon, but rushed towards Xiao Qiao. The dragon turtle was so scared that it almost wanted to escape. On the dragon turtle's back, not only was Xiao Qiao not afraid of ghosts, he was even braver. Rays of five-colored divine light shot forward like a rainbow. Although the dragon turtle didn't know why Xiao Qiao was doing this, if Xiao Qiao didn't retreat, how could Yi Fei retreat? The destructive sword light appeared once again. Yi Fei stood in front of Xiao Qiao. Layers of sword light turned into sword energy and killed all the approaching ghost babies. With Yi Fei's help, the dragon turtle became bolder. It carried Xiao Qiao and suddenly appeared above Yi Fei's head. Roar! The dragon turtle roared in a certain direction. Xiao Qiao made a sound to show that he understood. At the same time, a ray of five-colored divine light shot towards that direction. The Thousand Cave old demon's face was filled with fear. He wanted to return to his physical body. He was, after all, a quasi-emperor and had seen a lot of things. He could tell that Xiao Qiao's five-colored divine light was the nemesis of his divine soul. In his anger, he decided to return to his physical body. Even if he had to die and turn into an evil spirit, he would release a quasi-emperor stage ability to kill Yi Fei and Xiao Qiao, who had humiliated him. Noticing the Thousand Caves old demon's actions, a dazzling sword light whizzed past the corpse worms and ghost infants. It was thrown out by Yi Fei like an arrow, then fell straight down from the sky. The Thousand Caves old demon heard a loud boom. The sword token had already pierced through the coffin in which his body was kept. His body was also pierced through. Without a body, the Thousand Cave old demon had become a ghost. The 1,000-cave-old demon was so angry that his divine soul almost exploded. "Demon, I will kill you today." Realizing that he couldn't escape, the 1,000-cave-old demon pounced towards Yi Fei like a madman. He wanted to bite Yi Fei to death. Just then, a huge black turtle appeared in front of him. Facing the quasi-emperor, the dragon turtle might have been scared witless. However, facing the quasi-emperor's injured spirit, the dragon turtle was full of domineering aura and had the demeanor of a henchman. Roar! The dragon turtle roared domineeringly. On the back of the tortoise, Xiao Qiao did her best to form the strongest 5-colored divine light without hesitation, piercing through half of the 1,000-cave-old demon's god soul. In the end, the 1,000-cave-old demon was only left with his head, glaring at Yi Fei with a humiliated expression. The 1,000-cave-old demon had never imagined that he, a quasi-emperor, an invincible existence in the demon continent, would be killed by a divine lord, a black tortoise, and a mysterious little girl. This was definitely the most humiliating and cowardly quasi-emperor that had ever died. Even Yi Fei couldn't help but sympathize with the 1,000-cave-old demon. But he still had to do what he had to do. The sword light whizzed past, and the remaining head of the 1,000-cave-old demon was smashed into pieces. Then Yi Fei rushed towards the altar. He pressed his hand on the 1,000-cave-old demon's body, which hadn't completely dried up yet. The Azura blood-conquering art had to be used within 2 hours of killing the opponent, because after 2 hours, the cultivator's bloodline would dissipate. Yi Fei naturally didn't dare to be careless, and hurriedly used the Azura blood-conquering art as quickly as possible. Even so, it took Yi Fei half an hour to refine a drop of blood essence from the 1,000-cave-old demon's body. He couldn't even cultivate the complete Azura blood bead. This made Yi Fei depressed. The 1,000-cave-old demon was seriously injured. First, he was severely injured by the earthly emperor's spirit. It was a miracle that he was still alive. Then, Yi Fei and Xiao Qiao took advantage of the situation and attacked him together. Not only did his physical body die, but his divine soul also dissipated. It was already lucky for Yi Fei to be able to refine a drop of blood essence. I wonder if this drop of blood essence can give a cultivator a bloodline. Yi Fei was doubtful. He thought for a while and put the drop of blood essence into a bottle. After all, the 1,000-cave-old demon's bloodline must be extraordinary to be able to break through to the quasi-emperor realm. Of course, I can't let go of the cultivation resources of the 1,000-cave-old demon. Yi Fei's spirit suddenly turned into excitement. The eyes of the dragon turtle, who was still at the side, lit up when it heard this. Xiao Qiao squeaked happily and jumped down from the dragon turtle. She opened her arms and wanted to hug Yi Fei. Yi Fei also opened his arms and was about to hug Xiao Qiao. However, the moment he opened his arms, Xiao Qiao was already a step away from him. She opened her arms and missed. With a bump, she fell to the ground. At the same time, a ribbon fell from Xiao Qiao's forehead. Yi Fei was speechless when he realized that Xiao Qiao had been fighting with his eyes closed. No wonder Xiao Qiao was not afraid of ghosts and was so brave. The dragon turtle even ran over, looking like a hero that had done a great job. It directly put a black pot in front of Yi Fei. Yi Fei's face twitched. Needless to say, Xiao Qiao was fighting like this because of this stupid turtle. What was depressing was that if the dragon turtle didn't come up with this stupid idea, Xiao Qiao wouldn't have been so brave to face so many ghost babies and the 1,000-cave-old demon's ghost king. It could be said that the dragon turtle and Xiao Qiao were the biggest contributors to Yi Fei being able to kill a quasi-emperor as a monarch god. Yi Fei could only hold back his frustration and take out a pile of mystical stones to let the dragon turtle go back to the beast mark space to eat. Then, Yi Fei rushed towards the ownerless ghost babies. These ghost babies were evil creatures refined by the 1,000-cave-old demon. Any one of them would be a huge threat. The only thing Yi Fei could do was to destroy all of them. Then, He chopped off the head of the 1,000-cave-old demon with his own hands and walked out of the demonic palace with the head in his hand. He took a step towards the sky. 1,000-cave-old demon and is dead. Nest of 1,000 demons is officially destroyed. After that, Yi Fei no longer paid attention to the battle outside. Renzu and the Quasi-Emperor are both dead. If that's the case, the people outside will not be able to win. In that case, these subordinates were too useless. Chapter 2543. A great battle is imminent. Yi Fei's departure did not change the fate of the Nest of 1,000 Devils. Following the deaths of Renzu and the Quasi-Emperor, the disciples of the Nest of 1,000 Devils knew that they had committed many evil deeds and would never surrender. Thus, they began to aimlessly break out of the encirclement. Once again, a desperate battle broke out between the two sides. In this battle, Long Guang and Long Jiaojiao's Demon Emperor's scripture was extremely eye-catching. The Demon Emperor's scripture was also innately suitable for half-dragon people to cultivate. It allowed them to repair the defects in their bloodline and transform from half-dragon to a true dragon. Long Guang's divine sovereign status was the most terrifying nightmare for the Tao lords of the Nest of 1,000 Devils. Wherever the demonic dragon passed, corpses littered the ground. The entire nest of 10,000 devils was soon engulfed in flames. Amidst the flames, Yi Fei found the location of the nest of 10,000 devils' treasury under the guidance of Xiao Cao's divine eye of heaven and earth. As a former demon palace, the nest of 1,000 devils was incomparably evil. The amount of cultivation resources the nest of 1,000 devils had plundered left Yi Fei somewhat dumbfounded. A total of 5 million mystic veins, and a large number of divine weapons and natural treasures. There are also countless mystical stones and pills. It's a pity that the cultivation techniques of the nest of 1,000 devils are all too evil. Yi Fei flipped through a few of the demonic path cultivation techniques in the nest of 10,000 demons. They were either cruel or evil. Yi Fei shook his head and destroyed all of them with a ray of sword light. Then, he and Xiao Cao busied themselves with collecting all kinds of treasures, especially those mystic veins. As two large families that ate mystic veins, they were the main targets of Yi Fei and Xiao Cao's collection. As for the dragon tortoise, its head had long been raised high, but its head was buried in the pills and gorging on them. In just a short while, the dragon tortoise had actually eaten 1/10 of the pills in the treasury. Yi Fei and Xiao Cao stared at it from the sidelines. Only then did the dragon tortoise feel guilty and run off to loot the profound stones. By the time Yi Fei came out of the treasury, the entire nest of myriad devils was already devoid of the sounds of battle. There were only corpses strewn across the ground and the heavy breathing of the survivors. Master, fortunately, we have not let you down. We have finally destroyed the nest of myriad devils. We are finally free. All of this is given to us by Master. I, Lu Henmo, am willing to lead my family and submit to Master. Lu Henmo was covered in blood and one of his arms was broken. However, the moment he saw Yi Fei, Lu Henmo immediately knelt down to show his loyalty. Yi Fei did not refuse this loyalty, and his dignified gaze coldly swept over all of the families present as he said, "Now, you can choose to leave, or you can choose to continue following me and leave the demon province and enter the divine continent to establish a new faction. You have 1 hour to think about it. Lu Henmo, you have contributed greatly to the battle. Bring your people into the treasury and choose the treasures that are suitable for you." Other than the Xian vein, Yi Fei did not touch any of the treasures in the nest of myriad devils. He wanted to win people's hearts at this time. When they saw that Lu Henmo had just pledged his loyalty and could get a share of the treasures in the demon palace, even more ancient martial art practitioners were tempted. They knelt down one after another to show their loyalty to Yi Fei. Of course, there were also some ancient martial art practitioners who were unwilling to leave their homes and enter the divine prefecture. After they expressed their gratitude to Yi Fei, they chose to leave with their people. Yi Fei did not stop them and allowed them to leave. Of course, these people could forget about participating in the distribution of the treasures in the nest of myriad devils. Yi Fei, have you really decided to return to the divine prefecture? However, the whereabouts of my people from the dragon tribe are still unknown. Long Guang walked over and said worriedly, Uncle Long, don't worry. The dragon tribe still has Long Xing. Although he has a big mouth, he is still very capable. Moreover, the Wind and Cloud Hall is asking about my death so wantonly. This makes me a little worried about the situation in Qingzhou. How about this? Lu Henmo, send a group of trusted people to stay in the demon continent. They will gather the people who are willing to follow me and move them to Qingzhou. As for the others, those who are above the Tao Lord level will follow me to leave the demon continent and enter the divine prefecture. Yi Fei ordered in a deep voice. Other than the ancient martial art practitioners of the Lord of Heaven who stayed behind, Yi Fei decided to bring the rest of the ancient martial art practitioners with him to the divine prefecture. They would also use the divine prefecture to return to Qingzhou. While Yi Fei was in the demon continent leading a large group of Tao lords into the divine prefecture, Qingzhou was already in a state of turmoil. After Rizu's poison of the void was removed, not only was Renzu overseeing Qingzhou, but Lord Pan, a divine lord, had also rushed over. The divine tree of the heavenly path had also brought a large number of Ling clan members to help refine divine weapons and elixirs. The ancient martial art practitioners of Qingzhou broke through their realms very quickly. Most importantly, with the intervention of Rizu and Lord Pan's palace, the ancient martial art practitioners of Qingzhou had undergone a huge improvement in their cultivation techniques and divine powers. This improvement made the ancient martial art practitioners of Qingzhou comparable to those of the divine prefecture in terms of cultivation technique. The only thing that Qingzhou lacked was cultivation resources and the number and quality of ancient martial art practitioners with bloodlines. However, with the addition of Zhao Qianjun, Fu Renjie, Pang Bei, Lu Qing, Bai Yanran, Bai Shizhong, Mad Dog, and a large number of other experts, the current Qingzhou had already become an extremely powerful force. Although it was not as powerful as the top 10 forces of the divine prefecture, it was still barely able to put up a fight. However, after hearing that Purple Moon had secretly sent someone to deliver the news of the alliance between the Wind Cloud Palace and the Sword Palace, Rizu and Lord Pan's faces were still filled with worry. They looked at the Tian Fa Quasi-Emperor and the Grand Supreme Dean, who were sitting below them. As for the Alliance Master Shang Jing, she had already forcefully taken over the Grand Supreme Dean on a dark and windy night and became his wife. Therefore, she had retreated behind the scenes. However, Shang Jing's cultivation did not fall behind. She was now an early-stage Tao Lord. The Grand Supreme Dean and the Tian Fa Quasi-Emperor had already broken through to the half-step Divine Lord realm under Rizu's guidance due to the strength of their bloodlines. The others, such as the Guardian Elder of the Six Sacred Sects, had also broken through to the late-stage Tao Lord realm. However, the Guardian Elder's disciple, Zhao Qianjun, had surpassed him. He was the first junior expert to break through to the half-step Divine Lord realm, living up to the name of the evil demon Sword King. Fu Renjie and Pang Bei, who were behind him, had just broken through to the late-stage Tao Lord realm. It was worth mentioning that Yi Shanshan had also broken through to the early-stage Tao Lord realm with the help of her ice bloodline. Only Yi Fei's disciple, Yi Shaochan, had cultivated slower because she did not have a bloodline. Currently, she was still at the late-stage Lord of Heaven realm. However, by relying on the Golden Body of Despair and the Taiji Sword Dao, even many Tao Lord bloodline martial artists were no match for Yi Shaochan. This shocked Rizu. He thought to himself that the more powerful a master was, the more powerful a disciple would be. It's a pity that Yi Fei's disciple does not have a powerful bloodline. This is destined to make her martial path more difficult than anyone else's. Unless she can obtain an ancient god golden body that is stronger than the golden body of despair and change her fate. She can obtain an ancient god bloodline as a mortal. Rizu sighed in the largest palace of the Tianwu kingdom. Chapter 2544. Just for a battle, your majesty is right. Therefore, we have two things to do. First, we need to move all the important people below the Dao Lord level out of Green Province and into Blackwater Nation. The Wind Cloud Palace and Sword Palace would never expect that in just a few years, we've not only conquered the entire Green Province, but we've also secretly taken control of the neighboring Blackwater Nation. This nation already belonged to the Divine Prefecture and had submitted to the Yinyang Palace. Who would have thought that the Tianfa Quasi-Emperor would dare to pluck the hair from a tiger's head? Together with the Supreme Dean, the Guardian Elders, and many other experts of the older generation, they secretly controlled the various aristocratic families of the Blackwater Nation and even subtly made the royal family a mere figurehead. This was also the Tianfa Quasi-Emperor's way out for the Tianwu Kingdom and the Earth Domain. Even Rizu and Pan Wang were shocked. They had not known about this before. The Earth Domain has many talents. Pan Wang praised the Tianfa Quasi-Emperor's insidiousness. Rizu nodded helplessly. Since you've made your decision, then quickly retreat. Everyone below the Lord of Heaven, retreat. Everyone above the Dao Lord level, except for the juniors, stay. In the battle of the Heavenly Palace, I fled because of my cowardice, causing the Palace Lord to die in battle. My brothers were bitterly disappointed. Now I can't repeat the same mistake. No, Senior Rizu, we want to fight. The human emperor is not here, but we are still here. Fu Renjie and Pang Bei roared together. The remaining Dongfangyu, the army of destruction, Shuiyu, Xia Jun, Luo Xie, and the others were also burning with anger and fighting spirit. We want to fight too. We want to fight for Yi Fei and protect our home. Yes, fight. Ling Siki hugged a small milk can, her face red as she shouted crisply. Beside her stood the dark-faced Dao Lord Soaring Snake and the Lord of Heaven. A large number of troops had gathered outside the palace. These were the iron troops of the Tianwu Kingdom that had fought in all directions in recent years. They were led by the former four kings of the northern region. Further away, many martial artists from the Human God Palace, Heavenly God Palace, and the Human Emperor Palace had appeared. Beside them, Sorcerer God led a large army of sorcerers and walked over. Your Majesty, Lightning Ancestor, Divine Sovereigns, we have come here for a battle. In the Tianwu Kingdom, there are only heroes who die in battle. At the front of the crowd, Yi Shanshan, Yi Shaochan, Zhao Xinian, and the rest of the younger generation experts of family Yi were all present. Yi Shanshan, Yi Shaochan, Zhao Xinian, and the others. No one was willing to leave this battle. The Divine King Divine Palace to battle. Divine Palace is of you to say. Old Emperor, I don't like what you're saying. Before Zhao Xing could finish his sentence, a chicken drumstick appeared out of thin air and smashed into Zhao Xing's mouth. Lu Qing and Bai Yanran were surprised when they saw the drumstick. It's the eight-armed sword demon. There are so many Dragonians. The current headmaster of the Divine Star Academy, Jiang Zhen, also exclaimed in shock. He saw that behind the sloppy Daoist, there was actually a large group of flood dragons, and on top of the flood dragons, there were even the legendary Draconians. Those Dragonians were naturally the dragon tribe that Long Xing belonged to. Along the way, the slovenly Daoist priest learned of Sword Palace's actions and rushed to Qingzhou. However, he bumped into Long Xing and decided to lead the dragon tribe to help Qingzhou with his identity as the acting clan leader. Seeing these Dragonians and hearing of the eight-armed sword demon's reputation, other than Zhao Qianjun, who was also a sword demon, who was somewhat unconvinced, the lightning ancestor and Pan Wang were overjoyed. Good, good. With the help of the sword demon, we have the confidence to fight in the Battle of Qing Province. Emperor Zhao Xing swallowed the drumstick in one gulp and ordered in high spirits, "Pass down my decree. My subjects' requests for battle have been approved. The army can set off now." Kill. Both inside and outside the imperial palace, a murderous aura filled the air. Numerous airships rose into the air and carried the soldiers of the Tianwu nation to the border. On the other side of the border, several nations loyal to the Sword Palace were mobilizing their troops and making their final preparations to attack Qingzhou. A palace had been erected on the mountain peak at the front. Inside the palace, the former Baiyun nation monarch, who was now the Baiyun nation monarch, was looking in the direction of the Baiyun nation coldly. "This used to be my country, but it was stolen by that bastard Yi Fei. Now I will send my army to take back what belongs to me. Monarch godly, young Master Yin, please help me. I, Lu Baiyun, am eternally grateful. And maybe Shinjun, on behalf of the Fengyan Palace, I guarantee that as long as we conquer Qingzhou, Yi Fei's family will be at the mercy of the Sword Palace." Lu Baiyun cupped his fists and bowed to Li Moran, Yin Tianjin, and maybe Shinjun. Clearly, this battle was not as simple as the alliance of the Fengyan Palace and the Sword Palace. The Palace of the Divine King and the Yin Yang Palace had both acquiesced to send some of their forces to take a share of the loot. At the same time, this was a great opportunity for the major forces to bond and form an alliance. Not only the four major forces, but the other forces of the Divine Prefecture had also sent some martial artists to observe this battle. It's been so long, but there's still no movement in Qingzhou. Yimo hasn't appeared either. It seems that the rumors are true. Yi Fei might have really died in the Demon Continent. It's a pity that a prodigy comparable to Fengyun has died. Say, if Yi Fei is still alive in this battle, will Fengyun come to Qingzhou and have a great battle with him? When Yi Fei was mentioned, Fengyun would inevitably be mentioned. However, Yi Fei had already died, while Fengyun was like the sun at noon. They had already become the pride of the Divine Prefecture and the future of the Fengyun Palace. Boom! Just as these martial artists were discussing, a huge explosion came from the direction of the allied forces of the Fengyun Palace and the Sword Palace. It came from the place where the flying ships were stored. The furnace inside had been ignited maliciously. It caused a shocking explosion. In a short time, more than 50 flying ships had their furnaces exploded and were set ablaze. Without the flying ships, they would definitely be at a disadvantage when the battle broke out. The martial artists who were watching the battle from the nearby mountains were all shocked. Who was so bold as to enter the enemy's camp alone and destroy the flying ships? Could it be Yimo? Even Lu Baiyun, who was in the palace, was stunned. Then, he roared furiously, "How dare you! The Tianwu kingdom is about to be destroyed. Instead of surrendering, you dare to take the initiative to seek death? Could it be that Yimo is really not dead? It's even better that he's not dead. I, Yin Tianjin, have long wanted to take revenge for the Earth Carnage role. Back then, Yin Tianjin had been controlled by Yi Fei on the Earth Carnage role and thrown out of the ancient imperial heavens due to a momentary lapse in judgment. Not only did he lose his position on the Earth Carnage role, but he also became the laughing stock of many forces. This was also the reason why Yin Tianjin had led a large group of Yin family experts to participate in the battle when he heard that the Sword Palace and the Fengyun Palace had joined forces to attack Qingzhou and capture Yi Fei's family members. Yi Fei, no matter if you're alive or dead, I, Yin Tianjin, will wash Qingzhou with blood today and wash away my humiliation. Kill. Chapter 2545. The Return of the King. Boom. 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 The airships of Sword Palace and Wind Cloud Palace continued to explode. The person who did this didn't seem to be afraid of the retaliation of Wind Cloud Palace and Sword Palace. The airships exploded one after another, and were destroyed in the sea of fire. There were also powerful Tao lords in the Alliance army. They gathered after hearing the news and surrounded the sea of fire instead of saving the airship. After all, Yi Fei dared to sneak into the enemy's camp alone under the eyes of the Allied forces. It seemed that no one else in Qingzhou would dare to do such a shocking thing. The commander of the Allied forces, who was also the Emperor of Sword Country, had long given the order to stop Yi Fei at all costs and buy time for the Divine Lords to surround and kill Yi Fei. Yimo, today is the day you die. The Yin-Yang palanquin was very fast. It carried Yin Tianjin and rushed to the scene of the Sea of Fire. There was a blurry figure inside, constantly destroying the airship. He didn't care about the army's encirclement and Yin Tianjin's clamor at all. How dare you be so arrogant when you're about to die, Yimo? Yin Tianjin was furious. He stepped out of the Yin-Yang palanquin and emitted a terrifying Divine Lord aura. Many people who were watching the battle were shocked. Yin Tianjin had become a Divine Lord in just a few years? It wasn't surprising. Yin Tianjin was the first to rush out when he heard that Yi Fei had appeared. The Divine Lord realm was Yin Tianjin's greatest trump card. It was enough to crush any Tao Lord on the Earth Carnage roll. Kill! Yin Tianjin roared. Yin-Yang Qi bloomed from the void and turned into a huge Yin-Yang hand. It parted the Sea of Fire and reached for the figure in the Sea of Fire. The figure didn't care about the Divine Lord Realm's attack. He just kept destroying the last few airships. Many people broke out in cold sweat when they saw this. Now that Yin Tianjin had broken through to the Divine Lord Realm, how could the figure in the Sea of Fire resist him? Even Yin Tianjin had a sneer on his face. However, reality always slapped him in the face. His Divine Lord Realm Yin-Yang sky-flipping hand extinguished all the flames, but just as he was about to hit the figure, a purple beam of purple light shot out. That figure suddenly erupted with a terrifying purple light beam. That light beam eventually condensed into a purple battle sword. The sword shook the universe, and its might shook the universe. The light of the Yin-Yang sky-flipping hand actually collapsed under that sword light and turned into flowing light that filled the sky. Purple light. Yimo's golden body of despair seems to be this kind of light. Could it really be Yi Fei? He didn't die on Demonic Mountain but hid in Qingzhou? This scene caused many martial artists to be secretly shocked. Yin Tianjin's eyes turned gloomy. You've broken through to Sir God? But even so, I will definitely defeat you. Great Yin-Yang Universe / The dissipated Yin and Yang Qi condensed in the sky again, forming a Yin-Yang divine blade. Yin Tianjin raised the blade and slashed the purple beam of light. Behind the beam of light was an ordinary face. However, the owner of the face wasn't Yi Fei. It was a completely unfamiliar face. Everyone was shocked by this scene. Yin Tianjin stared at the ordinary-looking face and said, "I don't care who you are, but you have to die for going against the Alliance army. Kill." The surging Yin and Yang Qi transformed into blade light and slashed out. The sky and earth began to crumble as if they were going to turn into real Yin and Yang Qi. However, the ordinary face was like a purple god of war. It seemed to represent the power of heaven and earth. It punched the sky and the Yin-Yang divine blade trembled as if it couldn't withstand the power of the punch. This is impossible. Qingzhou has such a genius other than Yi Fei. Maybe Shenjun and Limoran stepped out of the void at the same time and tried to surround the newcomer from different directions. Kill. Bai Yun God, who was the last to step out, unleashed his full power and charged at the newcomer. I know you. You are Yi Fei's good friend. All of you deserve to die. The wind and clouds shuddered and gathered from all directions. Bai Yun Immortal Lord was like a giant god of wind. Every move he made brought about terrifying hurricanes. These hurricanes were so sharp that they could easily reduce a mountain range to ashes. However, the purple figure didn't say anything in the face of these terrifying hurricanes. The sky and earth were filled with the roar of Tao. At this moment, The purple figure seemed to have turned into an existence of Tao. His purple gas began to move unhindered. Instantly, it spread 800 kilometers. It was terrifying and shocking. Upon seeing this scene, Lemoran and Divine Lord Mabi suddenly thought of something. Their faces were filled with shock and disbelief. The mighty purple gas isn't Yi Mo's golden body of despair. Instead, it's the majesty of a sage. Oh no, he's an innate saint. There was an uproar among the warriors who heard this. The purple figure in the hurricane was silent. That's right, this figure was Defan, who had gone out to train. Although he didn't participate in the Earth Carnage role battle, his cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds under the providence of a saint. He wasn't inferior to any of the top 10 experts on the Earth Carnage role. What was even more surprising was that Defan had some fortuitous encounter in the Divine Prefecture. He had broken through to the Divine Lord realm on his own. Not long ago, Defan heard that the Wind Cloud Palace and the Sword Palace had joined forces to destroy the Azure Province. However, he was still a step too late. The Sword Palace and the Wind Cloud Palace had already sent their armies to bear down on the border. The only thing Defan could do was to sneak into the enemy's camp and destroy the airships to reduce the pressure on the Azure Province. Yi Fei isn't here, but I, Defan, am here. Whoever enters the Azure Province will be my enemy, Defan. Rumble. The mighty purple aura converged and formed a purple providence dragon that coiled around Defan's body. From this, one could see how powerful Defan's providence was as an innate saint. Even Mabi and Lemoran secretly felt that way. Bai Yun God and Yin Tianjin were filled with murderous intent. They didn't care if Defan was a saint or anyone else. As long as they had something to do with Yi Fei, they would vent their hatred. Young Master Yin, how about we join forces to capture this fake saint and use him as a sacrifice? Ha ha, that's right. We'll let that country bumpkin Yi Fei and those lowly Azure Province people know the power of the Yin Yang Palace. Yin Tianjin didn't reject the suggestion. He released the Yin Yang Divine Blade and wanted to kill Defan. Bai Yun God sneered and gathered the power of wind and clouds in his hand. This power turned into a wind tiger and a cloud dragon. The tiger roared in the forest and the dragon roared in the sky as it pounced on Defan. Chapter 2546. True Body of Morals. Following the rumbling of the Tao, the purple dragon of Providence suddenly transformed into two identical Defangs, standing in a tripartite formation. Defan himself seemed to have transformed into Tao. Along with his Tao voice, the three figures all unleashed the terrifying might of divine emperors. One charged toward Yin Tianjin, one charged toward Bai Yun Divine Emperor, and the last one stepped on a purple cloud and tried to break out of the encirclement. How is this possible? The incarnation's boundary should be a level lower than the main body's boundary, so why are all of his incarnations at the Divine Lord realm? This meant that Defan alone had 3 times the battle prowess of a Divine Lord. In the same realm, he was invincible. Many people's faces were filled with shock and disbelief. Outside the army, the Divine Lords of the other forces also showed up, especially a prince of the Red Moon Divine Dynasty who was the most knowledgeable. He exclaimed, "It's said that an innate saint must have 3 virtues: establishing virtue in speech, establishing virtue through hygiene, establishing virtue through battle, establishing virtue through non-aggression. When the 3 virtues are gathered, one can cultivate the 3 virtues incarnation, and one's realm will be on par with the original body." Boom! The words of the Crimson Moon Prince caused the hearts of all the martial artists present to tremble. No one would have thought that in a small place like the Qing province, besides Yi Fei, there would be a natural-born saint like Defan. Not only did he make a clean speech, but he also made a meritorious contribution in battle. What Defan had condensed now was indeed the 3 virtues, true bodies of the saints. This was a kind of innate divine ability of the saint. When he was in the Earth realm, Di Fan could only comprehend the three holy fists. When he was in the Heaven realm, all of Di Fan's saint fate had exploded. In just a few years, he had already condensed 2 incarnations. Only the final Li De true body was left. Then, Di Fan could immediately become a saint and become a divine ancestor. After hearing what Prince Chi Yu said and seeing Di Fan's amazing achievements and luck, maybe Shinjun and Sir God Li Moran finally couldn't hold it in any longer. They looked at each other and terrifying killing intent surged out from their bodies. It's already enough that Qingzhou has one Yi Fei. Now that Yi Fei finally died on Demonic Mountain, we definitely can't let Qingzhou have another Yi Fei. The sky was filled with flames. Li Moran, who had been crowned as a divine priest, was also charging towards Di Fan with a fiery divine blade in his hand. Maybe Shinjun smiled sinisterly. He took a deep breath and the air currents around him became sharp. They were like swords made of air currents. They were silent and formless as they pierced towards Di Fan's body. Suddenly, a few more Sir Gods from the Yin family walked out of the palace in front of him. They sneered and charged towards Di Fan. Di Fan's situation became extremely dangerous. Even though he was an innate saint, it was inevitable that he would die when surrounded by so many divine emperors. In less than 10 breaths of time, one of Di Fan's incarnations was destroyed by the combined forces of Bai Yun God Lord and Yin Tianjin. They laughed together. "Today, we'll turn you into a corpse." Roar. The deafening roar shook the world. Just as Di Fan was trapped in a tight encirclement and found it difficult to break through, a few huge mystical dragons suddenly flew over from the distant void. Upon closer inspection, they were not real mystical dragons, but the spiritual bodies of the mystical dragons after their death. However, they were controlled by a black-robed woman. Her expression was cold, and her body emitted a thick sanguine light. She was like a blood-soaked rose that bloomed in front of everyone. In the direction of the Deathmatch Palace, Jiang Hui's face suddenly changed. "It's Yen Bing. Wasn't she grounded by the Palace Master? Why is she here?" Sword Palace, Wind Cloud Palace and Qingzhou are not allowed to enter. "Whoever dares to enter will be my enemy," Yen Bing said coldly on the divine dragon. Her body was filled with anger and murderous intent. Feeling this anger, the divine dragon beast spirit under her feet roared fiercely. It opened its mouth and spat out a large amount of terrifying dragon flames. It melted the void and tore a huge hole in the allied army's formation. Yen Bing went straight for Li Muran and started fighting. "Go back. I'll hold them off." Yen Bing looked at Di Fan indifferently. Di Fan laughed heartily. "A man would rather die than retreat. Yi Fei won't retreat. If you don't retreat, how can I, Di Fan, retreat?" Di Fan blocked the attacks of Bai Yun God and Yin Tianjin alone. He was still filled with fighting spirit. Purple energy covered his body like armor. However, although Di Fan was strong, he was facing too many divine emperors. Seeing that Di Fan was about to lose, a huge gate suddenly appeared in the air. It was the Real Gate of Deities. A young divine emperor walked out of the gate and shouted angrily, "Today, I, Wu Jie, have finally reached the divine emperor realm. I will fight with the bastards of Sword Palace and Wind Cloud Palace." "Wait a minute, young master. The human ancestor has warned you not to get involved in this matter." Anxious shouts could be heard from within the celestial spiritual gate. It was obvious that Wu Jie's appearance had gone against the human ancestor's will. However, Wu Jie didn't care at all. The moment he appeared, he charged towards Yin Tianjin. Yin Tianjin's expression darkened. "Wu Jie, do you really think you're a match for me just because you were lucky enough to get into the top 10 of the Disha realm? Bastards of the Yin family, come and fight!" Boom! The heavenly jade star shook. Wu Jie was already fighting with Yin Tianjin. The divine emperors of Merak Palace who came later were afraid that Wu Jie would die. They could only brace themselves and stop the divine emperors of the Yin family. At this moment, there was a sudden burst of war drums from afar. At this critical moment, the army of Tianwu Kingdom finally arrived. Zhao Qianjun, Fu Renjie, Lu Qing, Bai Yanran, and other young experts all rushed to the front. Then, they saw the chaotic battle in the sky. Xia Jun's eyes were sharp. He immediately saw Di Fan. It's Di Fan. He has reached the Divine Emperor realm. Di Fan is in a bad situation. There are too many Divine Emperors. Fu Renjie, Pang Bei, let's go. Zhao Qianjuan's sword-intent soared into the sky. Suddenly, he transformed into an evil sword and charged forward. Wherever he passed, the cultivators of the allied army would wither and die. The sloppy Taoist was shocked. This kid's sword is even more demonic than mine. Roar! Before he could finish his words, two loud roars shook the slovenly Taoist so much that his drumstick fell to the ground. It was Fu Renjie who had turned into a dark demonic dragon and roared. He swept through the allied army. But the most terrifying was still Pang Bei. This chubby little fatty who only knew how to eat after transforming actually became a true primordial demon ape. He didn't even need any mystiques. The ancient demon ape roared and grabbed a mountain with his bare hands. He threw it out like a rock. A large number of cultivators of the allied army were killed along the way. Long Xing, who was about to turn into a demonic dragon, widened his eyes. Many divine lords from the dragon race were also dumbfounded when they saw the transformed Pang Bei and Fu Renjie. Originally, many people thought that the Sword Palace and Wind Cloud Hall would be able to destroy the Azure Prefecture as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. However, when the power of the Azure Prefecture truly erupted, everyone was horrified to discover that the seemingly tiny Azure Prefecture was actually filled with hidden talents. Chapter 2547. The Battle of Qingzhou. However, it was also because of the great potential that Qingzhou had shown that the Sword Palace and the Wind Cloud Palace were more determined to destroy Qingzhou. After all, without Yi Fei, Qingzhou already had such great potential. If Yi Fei was lucky enough to survive and return to Qingzhou, the Sword Palace and the Wind Cloud Palace would not be able to eat or sleep in peace. All troops attack. Suddenly, the furious roars of the Baiyun god and maybe Shinjun came from the void, which meant that the battle had officially begun. The allied army immediately roared and charged toward the army of Qingzhou. The army of Qingzhou on the other side also quickly divided into 4 camps, which were led by the 4 kings of the northern region at the same time. Iron-armored warships quickly rushed out of the army formation, which were filled with experts who were above the Lord of Heaven of Qingzhou. There were also Dao lords who drove powerful flying ships and formed small teams to weave through the allied army. Dong! Suddenly, the world trembled again. Suddenly, huge stone men that were hundreds of meters tall walked out from the rear of Qingzhou. They were new war puppets that Gong Zhu and a large group of sorcerers had refined using the Heaven Realm's divine patterns. These puppets were not of high realms and were generally only at the heavenly venerable realm. However, when thousands or tens of thousands of war puppets charged together, the scene was absolutely shocking and terrifying. In particular, on these war puppets stood the Supreme Dean of Yijian, the Quasi-Emperor of Tianfa, and other experts of the older generation. There were also Dongfang Yu, Lin Tianjiao, the Army of Destruction, and Shui Yu, who were a group of the most outstanding young people in the land. On the other hand, although the allied army had many people, they came from different countries and were not a whole. Most importantly, the flying ships that could make use of the allied army's advantage in numbers were all destroyed by Di Fan's sneak attack. First of all, the allied army lost their advantage in the air on the warship. Wherever the warships passed, any allied army warrior who dared to soar into the air would be the first target of the warship. As a last resort, the allied army could only attack from the ground. However, the ground was also extremely dangerous. In particular, the tens of thousands of war puppets were not only the best cannon fodder, but they were also the nightmare of the Allied army's low-level warriors. When the two armies collided like a torrent of steel, the Allied army's formation was soon on the verge of collapse. Victory for Qingzhou. On a hill not far away, Tao Lord Soaring Snake and the Lord of Heaven were leading a large group of demon beasts. These were the gigantic demons of the Demon Beast Kingdom and were also Rizu's most loyal subordinates. At that moment, Riza handed these subordinates over to Tao Lord Soaring Snake to form the aura of 10,000 demons and suddenly charged towards the Alliance army from the side. Not good. It's Rizu, that bastard. It was the mount of the heavenly palace of Despair's palace master. The divine lords of the Yin family were all from the Yin Yang palace. They had participated in the first battle against the Lightning Ancestor, so they naturally knew that the Lightning Ancestor had once established a Fey Beast Kingdom in Azure State and had secretly cultivated a Fey Beast army. The Sir Gods of the Yin family decisively abandoned Defan and charged forward to fend off the flood of demonic beasts. However, before they could do anything, above the void, Bai Yun God Emperor suddenly snorted, "Elders, do you still want to watch the show? Haha, Lu Baiyun, we are not watching the show. We are just waiting for the fish to take the bait." A group of divine lords of the Wind Cloud Hall suddenly walked out from the palace on the peak of the mountain. These divine lords looked arrogant and looked down on the 10,000 demons as if they were nothing. "It's just a bunch of bastards. Let's kill them and reward our army." Roar. Before they finished speaking, countless loud dragon roars gathered together with the 10,000 demons. Since the divine lords of the Wind Cloud Hall had already attacked, Long Xing naturally wouldn't stay idle. He instantly transformed into a primordial demon dragon and led a large group of demi-dragons and flood dragons to attack. The divine lords of the Wind Cloud Hall were collectively shocked. Many factions that were watching the battle from the shadows were horrified. They naturally recognized that this was a group of demi-dragon people from the demon state. However, for some unknown reason, they had joined the Qing state's faction. When these powerful demi-dragon people fought the divine lords of the Wind and Cloud Hall, the battle that seemed certain to be won by the Alliance army gradually showed signs of being unable to withstand the onslaught. Seeing this scene, Bai Yun God Emperor's eyes bulged. Maybe Shinjun was so angry that he almost vomited blood. This time, the Sword Palace and the Wind Cloud Hall had joined forces and came with great momentum. If they couldn't conquer the tiny Azure State, then wouldn't the Sword Palace become a laughingstock? Kill, kill. All the divine lords of the Sword Palace, move out. Maybe roared furiously. Following his roar, another group of divine lords walked out from the palace. They all had the Sword Palace emblem on their bodies. They all sneered and attacked again. On the other side of the void, Lord Pan's sigh could be heard. Then, this divine lord led by Suifeng, by Yanran, by Shizhong, and all the forces of the Lord Pan Palace out of the void and resisted the attack of the Sword Palace. Both sides immediately fell into the most tragic and chaotic battle. Every moment, there were warriors from both sides dying in battle. There was even a dying divine lord from the Dragon Clan who directly pulled a young divine lord from the Wind Cloud Hall to perish together with him. The Wind Cloud Hall was naturally furious. The other forces that were watching the battle were also thinking the same thing. When the Sword Palace and the Wind Cloud Hall's joint forces pressed on, no one thought that the Qing province would be able to withstand them. It was only when the Qing province's army moved out and unleashed its enormous potential that the crowd was shocked to discover that the Qing province, which looked like a small pellet, contained strength that could contend against the Wind Cloud Hall, even if it was not comparable to the 10 great forces of the Divine Prefecture. Unfortunately, although the Azure State has great potential, its development time is too short. They can resist the Allied army and the Divine Lords, but they can't withstand the anger of the Wind Cloud Hall and the Sword Palace's Rinzu. Boom. As these factions discussed, they realized that the Allied army was actually losing. Some Renzu from the Wind Cloud Hall couldn't sit still anymore and strode out of the void with the fury of wind and thunder. At the same time, on the Azure State side, Rizu roared and transformed into a giant thunder beast. He wielded his thunder saber and faced Renzu head-on. Beside Rizu, the slovenly Taoist was sucked into the rune puppet and transformed into a terrifying sword demon with 8 arms and 4 faces. He quickly attacked the other Renzu from the Wind Cloud Hall. Long Tua, it seems that you are determined to betray the Sword Palace. In that case, I can't let you live. Immediately after Renzu from the Wind Cloud Hall, another Renzu from the Sword Palace came forward with an evil sword on his back. His expression was cold as he held his sword. Seeing this evil sword Renzu, Zhao Qianjun, who had always cultivated the evil sword, immediately sensed his presence and looked over coldly. Evil Sword Renzu also looked at Zhao Qianjun with admiration. You and I walk the same path of the sword. If you are willing to submit, I can make an exception and take you in as my disciple. Bullshit. My sword is evil but my heart is righteous. Your evil sword is also evil. You are inferior to me in the way of the evil sword. Zhao Qianjun unsheathed his sword and faced Renzu head-on. Evil Sword Renzu's expression suddenly darkened. He immediately used his evil star sword to shatter Zhao Qianjun's sword and pierce through Zhao Qianjun's body. Since you refuse, you will die under my evil sword. Boom! Chapter 2548. Death Fight Palace. Brother Jean, I'll fight that innate saint. Another young man with monstrous demonic energy walked out of the ice and snow. It was Naylan Shui. He and Zhan Feng had both been defeated by Yi Fei. He wanted revenge, so he came to Qing province with Zhan Feng. Following Zhan Feng and Naylan Shui Yao's actions, the Battle Emperor Palace and the Naylan family, who had protected them, naturally knew what to do. They attacked at the same time and charged towards Qing province. They also stood on the side of the allied army. The alliance army's defeat was immediately reversed. Under the siege of so many forces, the Qingzhou army was forced to retreat. Not only did they give up the border, but they also allowed the alliance army to march into Qingzhou with their heads held high. They charged straight for the Tianwu Kingdom's imperial city. What a pity! In the battle at the Azure Prefecture's borders, the Sword Palace, Storm Palace, and even the Divine Lords were unable to do anything to the Azure Prefecture's army. The Alliance army was even nearly defeated by the Azure Prefecture and became a laughingstock. Speaking of Qing province, it's really not peaceful. It's said that it used to be the place where the earthly emperor raised his troops. Later, it was occupied by Rizu and became the gathering place of the remnants of the Heavenly Palace of Despair. Now, it's occupied by the remnants of Yemo, who has corrupted the order of the Divine Prefecture. If this place is not eradicated, how can the dignity of the Divine Prefecture exist? The bloody battle in Qingzhou not only affected the top 10 forces of the Divine Prefecture, but also shocked the entire Divine Prefecture. While people marveled at the great potential of Qingzhou, they could not help but sigh secretly. Although Qingzhou is strong, it lacks resources after all. It is not as good as the Sword Palace and the Wind and Cloud Hall that occupy Divine Prefecture. It is said that in the bloody battle in Qingzhou, the Allied forces lost 5,000 men, while Qingzhou's Tianwu Kingdom lost more than 10,000 men. I also heard that an important monarch died there. It's said that Rizu was also injured by Renzu of the Sword Palace and Wind Cloud Palace. That thunder beast has been faking its death for thousands of years. I'm afraid it's really going to die now. The most shocking thing is still the Lord Pan Hall. I never thought that the Lord Pan Hall would actually be a remnant of the Heavenly Palace of Despair. They've even occupied the city of God-Kings for many years. However, the most tragic ones are still the geniuses of Qingzhou. Innate saints, demons, and demons. If they appeared in our Divine Prefecture, they would definitely be geniuses of the generation. Unfortunately, they were born in the wrong place and were also implicated by Yemo. They can only be buried with Qingzhou. Bang! All the tables and chairs in the restaurant suddenly turned to dust. The sounds of discussion also came to a halt. Everyone looked at the entrance of the restaurant in horror. A divine lord youth walked in. This youth was dressed in a purple gold black robe. Behind him was a large group of Dao lords. All of them emanated a dense demonic aura that struck fear into those who looked at them. The person who walked in was naturally Yi Fei. The first thing he did when he returned to the Divine Land was to enter the restaurant to inquire about the news. As soon as he entered, he heard the grievous news. The allied forces of the Sword Palace and the Wind Cloud Palace had actually invaded the Qing province. The Heavenly Martial Kingdom's army had suffered a crushing defeat, and even the Kingdom Lord had perished. Although Yi Fei did not have a close relationship with the four great kingdoms of the northern region, they were still from his hometown. Now that they were dead, the anger in Yi Fei's heart was instantly ignited. Is this information true? Where did you get it from? Yi Fei stared coldly at these people. Sensing Yi Fei's anger, Lu Henmo and the other warriors of the Demon Province were filled with murderous intent. They did not mind killing people on the spot. After all, the customs of the Demon Province were cruel, and they advocated bloody battles. It was very common to kill people on the street because of a disagreement. Sensing the murderous intent of these people, the warrior who had been the loudest in the discussion was so frightened that his legs turned to jelly. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed. "Senior, please spare my life. I didn't know that spreading this information would violate the taboo of the Deathmatch Palace." Deathmatch Palace? Is this where the Deathmatch Palace is located? Yi Fei was a little surprised. He had not expected that the teleportation array of the nest of 10,000 demons would teleport them to the Deathmatch Palace. However, when he thought about how the Deathmatch Palace was famous for its deathmatch arena, and how the warriors of the Demon Province were always combative, there must be some who wished to come to the deathmatch arena to show off their skills. Yi Fei was relieved. He could not be bothered to ask these small warriors. Instead, he directly ordered the person, "Take me to the Deathmatch Palace." "Senior is not from the Deathmatch Palace?" That warrior was confused. However, when he saw the group of ferocious Demon Province warriors behind him, he tactfully did not dare to ask. Instead, he obediently led the way in front. It was only when Yi Fei walked out that the many warriors in the restaurant heaved a sigh of relief. Then, they once again discussed Yi Fei's identity in low voices and why he was heading to the Deathmatch Palace. Among them, there was one person who felt that Yi Fei looked very familiar. However, he could not recall who he was. After all, the trip to the Demon Province had affected Yi Fei greatly. Be it his aura or cultivation realm, they had all undergone a certain change. However, due to this change, when Yi Fei arrived at the Deathmatch Palace under the escort of hundreds of Demon Province warriors, the Deathmatch Palace disciples who had participated in the Earth Carnage proclamation recognized Yi Fei at a glance. The heavens are blind. This Yemo is actually not dead yet. This was the first reaction of many Deathmatch Palace disciples when they saw Yi Fei. Following that, they were enraged. As they sent out warning signals, they surrounded Yi Fei like a pack of wolves. "Yemo, you sure have guts. Back then, you stole the Big Dipper Divine Fist from my Deathmatch Palace. We did not go looking for you, yet you dare to come and seek your own death." Within the Deathmatch Palace, a Divine Lord Elder charged out angrily. "Insolence! How dare you be disrespectful to the young master? Scram inside and get your palace master to come out and speak." Seeing the Deathmatch Palace's rude attitude, Long Guang was enraged. He threw out a Fei Chi Dragon Fist forward and sent the Deathmatch Palace's Divine Lord retreating with a punch. The Divine Lord was alarmed. Only then did he realize that Yi Fei was very different from 3 years ago in the Imperial City. Not only had his cultivation realm increased to a terrifying level, even his aura faintly exuded the might of an overlord. What did this Yi-Mo experience in the Demon Province in the past 3 years? How did he manage to recruit such a group of ferocious Demon Province martialists? The Divine Lord's heart was in turmoil. He wanted to advance, but he couldn't. He felt extremely embarrassed and humiliated. Fortunately, at this moment, a powerful Renzu walked out of the Deathmatch Palace's heavy flower pavilion. "My name is Huali Renzu. Yi Fei, you have come this time to return the Big Dipper Divine Fist." "That's not it. This junior has come this time to collect a debt. Back then, on the Earth Carnage roll in the Imperial City, your palace's Jiang Hui owed me 5 million Xian veins. He hasn't paid it back in 3 years. Since Jiang Hui isn't paying it back, I can only come and collect it myself. I believe that the Deathmatch Palace won't renege on its debt, right?" Seeing that Huali Renzu's attitude wasn't good, Yi Fei naturally wouldn't try to curry favor with him. Instead, he adopted the same attitude as Huali Renzu. His words immediately enraged Huali Renzu. "How dare you? Do you really think that you can behave atrociously in my Deathmatch Palace just because you were lucky enough to survive the Demon Province? Not to mention that your Green Province is now in danger. Just based on the fact that you dare to speak to me in such a manner, I can kill you." Boom! The terrifying might of Renzu transformed into an invisible pressure that squeezed the air until it creaked. Long Guang and the others were tense as if they were facing a great enemy. Yi Fei's expression was calm as he walked towards Huali Renzu without dodging. "Kill me if you dare. However, I can guarantee that after I die, the Deathmatch Palace's Big Dipper Divine Fist will be as easy to pick up as cabbages by the roadside." Boom! Chapter 2549. Throw oneself into the net. What Yi Fei used was none other than the Death Battle Palace's primordial innate technique, the Big Dipper Divine Fist. This Divine Fist was the strongest technique of the Death Battle Palace and would never be taught to outsiders. Once it was taught to outsiders, the Death Battle Palace would suffer an incomparably heavy blow. When they saw that Yi Fei had learned the Fist of the North Star, all the disciples of the Deathmatch Palace were shocked. Even Huali Renzu was shocked and angry. He wanted to kill Yi Fei, but he was also afraid that if he really did kill Yi Fei, the Deathmatch Palace's secret technique would become like cabbage on the roadside. However, to be able to become a Renzu, Huali was quite quick-witted. I can't kill you, but I can capture you and imprison you in the Deathmatch Palace forever." Stars appeared in the sky, forming the Big Dipper. With the power of the stars and the might of Renzu, they tried to suppress Yi Fei. A dazzling purple-gold divine light appeared on Yi Fei's body. This was the light of the ancient gods, and it gave Yi Fei an immensely powerful defense that allowed him to withstand the power of the stars and Renzu's might. The same Big Dipper mystical fist collided with Renzu's Big Dipper constellation. Boom! When their fists collided, the void exploded and the Big Dipper constellations formed by the two of them exploded. However, Huali Renzu relied on his superior cultivation base to suppress Yi Fei's Big Dipper constellation. Then, he threw a starry fist at Yi Fei's chest. The disciples of the Deathmatch Palace cheered upon seeing this. "Yi-Mo, you're still far from being able to challenge Renzu." Huali Renzu was in high spirits and wanted to suppress Yi Fei. Long Guang and Long Jiaojiao were so nervous that their palms were sweating. However, Yi Fei roared and the Big Dipper constellation dispersed. The 6 paths of reincarnation formed by the 6 heavenly cauldrons appeared and attacked again. Huali Renzu's expression suddenly turned uglier than a pig's liver. Just as he was about to continue attacking Yi Fei's 6 cauldrons, The most terrifying cauldron of the ghost deity was hidden within Yi Fei's 6 cauldrons. This black cauldron was condensed by the ghostly emperor and refined by the ancient gods. It had long transformed into an extremely special divine weapon. Especially when Yi Fei activated it with his divine lord realm, the ghostly god cauldron immediately erupted with the power of a patriarch. There was a loud bang. Not only did Huali Rinzu's fist of the North Star fail to break the Black Cauldron, but the 9 underworld's force of the Black Cauldron caused his blood to boil. He was forced to retreat, leaving deep cracks in the void. All the disciples who saw this scene were shocked. Even Huali Rinzu was dumbfounded. He stared at Yi Fei, too shocked to say anything. Yi Fei was still calm, as if he wasn't the one who had attacked Rinzu. He even cupped his hands politely at Huali Rinzu and said, "Huali Rinzu, you're right. Us juniors are indeed far inferior to you." Huali Rinzu deliberately said these words to humiliate Yi Fei. But now, not only did he fail to humiliate Yi Fei, he even got slapped in the face. Huali Rinzu was so angry that the entire world seemed to have turned into a dark cloud. But just as Huali Rinzu was about to explode in anger, an even stronger force descended from the void. Another Rinzu appeared beside Huali Rinzu. While stopping Huali from exploding in anger, he looked at Yi Fei in surprise. "Demon Yi, you live up to your name. You're not the strongest god lord, but you're definitely the boldest. Is it not enough that you stole the fist of the North Star from my Death Arena Palace? Do you want to cause trouble in my Death Arena Palace? May I ask how I should address you, senior?" Yi Fei had a simple smile on his face. This smile was very contagious, causing the newly appeared berserker ancestor to have the misconception that Yi Fei was an honest and well-behaved person who stirred up trouble everywhere he went. It was as if the Death Battle Palace had a great misunderstanding of Yi Fei. "I'm Berserker. Senior Berserker, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm actually here to collect a debt. Jiang Hui owes me 5 million mystic vein crystals. This is written in black and white. I don't think the Death Arena Palace will go back on their word, right?" Huali Rinzu and Berserker Rinzu were furious. "Nonsense. You stole the fist of the North Star and threatened Jiang Hui to owe us. How dare you come here to collect your debt?" If it weren't for the fact that they were afraid that Yi Fei would really let the fist of the North Star roam the streets, the 2 Rinzu would have beaten Yi Fei to death. Long Guang and Long Jiao Jiao's palms were sweating, and even their foreheads were sweating. Yi Fei was still as calm as ever as he bowed and said, "That's exactly what I'm thinking. That's why I'm willing to take a little loss. I don't want the 5 million mystic vein crystals anymore. I can also return the fist of the North Star to you and promise that I won't teach it to anyone else. However, I have one condition. You want to use the celestial spiritual gate of the Death Arena Palace to return to Qingzhou and save your friends and family?" Berserker Rinzu might look boorish, but he was actually a meticulous person. He thought that he had already seen through Yi Fei's intentions. Huali Rinzu sneered. "Humph, after all this, you're here to beg our Death Arena Palace. How dare you be so arrogant when you're asking for help? Seniors, you've misunderstood again. I'm not here to return to Qingzhou, but to head to the Crimson Moon Imperial City. I have an important matter to discuss with the ancient Emperor of the Crimson Moon," Yi Fei said with a serious expression. What he said scared Long Guang and the group of Demon Province warriors behind him so much that they almost fell to the ground. Berserker Rinzu and Huali Rinzu were also shocked for a long time. Many of the Death Arena Palace disciples nearby were even more dumbfounded. Everyone in the Divine Prefecture knew that Yi Fei had awakened the ancient god's corpse spirit in the Crimson Moon Imperial City. Not only had he destroyed the ancient Emperor's heavens on the Earth Carnage Roll, but he had also killed the Purple Dragon King and many other celestial dynasties Rinzu. For this reason, the ancient Emperor of the Crimson Moon Imperial City didn't hesitate to project himself into the demon province and personally kill Yi Fei on the celestial demon mountain. In the end, this Yemo was lucky enough not to die. Now, the first thing he did after returning to the Divine Prefecture was to run to the Crimson Moon Imperial City. Not only did the two Renzu think differently, even the Death Arena Palace Master, who was secretly watching, was also baffled. What is Yi Fei trying to do? Qingzhou is in danger now, but instead of rushing back to help, he's actually running to the Imperial City to die. However, the Fist of the North Star must be taken back. Otherwise, with this kid's demonic nature, he would really do something like letting the Fist of the North Star roam the street. When he thought of rejecting Yi Fei, the warriors of the Divine Prefecture would be able to buy the most powerful fist of the Big Dipper from the Death Fighting Palace at any roadside stall. Even the Palace Master of the Death Fighting Palace, who was already a quasi-emperor of the Renhuang realm, could not help but shudder. Yi Fei, the Death Arena Palace, agree to your request. Seeing that you and Yan Bing are good friends, Berserker, Huali, the two of you, immediately send him to the Imperial City. No mistakes. The Death Arena Palace Master's calm voice came from the void. Upon hearing this order, Berserker Renzu and Huali Renzu looked at each other, not understanding what the Palace Master meant. However, they couldn't disobey the Quasi-Emperor's order, and they couldn't let Yi Fei sell the Fist of the North Star like cabbage. Even though they were extremely unwilling, the two Renzu still opened the gate of immortal essences as fast as they could. Chapter 2550. To borrow troops from the Divine Dynasty. Huali Renzu sneered sarcastically. Brat, this is the destruction caused by the ancient god's corpse spirit that you awakened. Now, the Crimson Moon Imperial City sees you as the god of plague. Everyone wants to catch you and beat you to death. Are you sure you want to enter the palace and seek an audience with the Crimson Moon Ancient Emperor? Of course, the grudge between me and the Ancient Emperor is purely a misunderstanding. Even if the entire Crimson Moon Imperial City wants to kill me, the Ancient Emperor of Crimson Moon will definitely do his best to protect me. However, before entering, I will allow you to set up a heaven and earth altar. Yi Fei's expression turned ugly when he saw how badly the ancient god's corpse spirit was damaged. He had no choice but to stop. He randomly chose an empty spot and began to summon the heaven and earth altar. As a former sorcerer emperor, Yi Fei was naturally proficient in sorcerer techniques. As he cast his sorcery, the entire sky above Crimson Moon Imperial City was immediately filled with dark clouds. It was as if a great devil was about to invade from the void. The residents of the Imperial City who had just experienced the tragic battle with the ancient god's corpse spirit were all trembling with fear. They thought that the ancient god's corpse spirit had returned. Huali Renzu and Berserker Renzu were baffled by Yi Fei's antics. They felt that Yi Fei was either crazy or a fool. Now that the Crimson Moon Holy Dynasty hated Yi Fei to the core, not only did Yi Fei walk right into their trap, he even dared to challenge the royal family again. He was clearly courting death. Could it be that Yemo knows that he has offended too many forces, so he gave up and wants to use his own death to exchange for a chance of survival in Qingzhou? Huali Renzu guessed coldly. Only Long Guang and Long Jiaojiao, who followed Yi Fei, vaguely understood Yi Fei's intention. They were secretly worried for Yi Fei. After all, the earthly sovereign's spirit had completely dissipated. Yi Fei's summoning of the heaven and earth altar had frightened the Crimson Moon Ancient Emperor. Otherwise, the furious Ancient Emperor of the Crimson Moon wouldn't mind swallowing Yi Fei alive. Who dares to behave atrociously in my Crimson Moon Imperial City? Yi Fei's act of summoning the heaven and earth altar quickly angered the Crimson Moon royal family. A large group of divine lords and Renzu had already rushed over after hearing the news. The person leading them was the Crimson Moon Ancient Emperor's trusted aide, the Imperial College's Vice-Chancellor Jing Tai. When they saw that the person performing the ritual was none other than Yi Fei, whom the Crimson Moon Imperial clan hated so much, even the human ancestor and Zheng Tai were stunned. The few members of the royal family who had rushed over felt as though they had met their mortal enemy. Their eyes instantly turned red. The heavens have opened their eyes. Yemo, you actually took the initiative to come here to die. Today, you shall return my imperial city, return my ancient imperial heavens, return my imperial family, and return my lost Renzu. Fight, kill. Seeing Yemo is like seeing an enemy. Don't say anything. Kill him on the spot. Some of the princes were already furious and prepared to attack. This roar finally woke Zheng Tai and Renzu up. Others didn't know why Yi Fei had summoned the heaven and earth altar, but Zheng Tai and Renzu, who had experienced the battle on Demonic Mountain, knew very well that Yi Fei was clearly summoning the earthly emperor's spirit again. Everyone, stop! Without the ancient emperor's orders, no one is allowed to attack. Young Master Yi, let's talk things over. Don't be rash. Zheng Tai and Renzu reacted as though they were facing a great enemy. They actually turned around and protected Yi Fei with all their might. Berserker Renzu and Huali Renzu were completely confused. Even the royal family of the Crimson Moon Empire looked at Zheng Tai in shock. However, Zheng Tai didn't explain. In the palace, the awakened ancient Emperor Crimson Moon was also secretly shocked. This brat is indeed a demon. Demonic Mountain had already let him off, but this time, he actually went overboard and came to the imperial city to cause trouble. Although he was furious when he saw the heaven and earth altar that could appear at any time and the earthly emperor's spirit that could walk out of the altar at any time, the ancient Emperor Crimson Moon could only suppress his anger and ask coldly, Yi Fei, I've already let bygones be bygones. Why are you here? The ancient Emperor Crimson Moon vaguely had the intention of sending Yi Fei off. The furious princes were all dumbfounded. Berserker Renzu and Huali Renzu were even more dumbfounded. They had sent Yi Fei here to see how Yi Fei would die. However, not only did the ancient Emperor Crimson Moon have no intention of killing Yi Fei, but his tone was actually quite polite. Hearing the ancient god Crimson Moon's voice, Yi Fei finally breathed a sigh of relief. He knew that he had made the right bet this time. The ancient Emperor Crimson Moon had been cautious all his life. As long as he didn't know that the earthly emperor's spirit had been completely destroyed, the ancient Emperor Crimson Moon wouldn't dare to take the risk and attack him. Thinking of this, Yi Fei didn't hold back anymore. He directly cupped his hands in the direction of the palace and said, Ancient Emperor, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to borrow an army from the ancient emperor. This demon Yi is crazy. He actually wants to borrow soldiers from the divine dynasty? Berserker Renzu and Huali Renzu sneered. They felt that Yi Fei had most likely gone mad while cultivating demonic techniques in the demon continent. The princes of the Crimson Moon divine dynasty were all furious. They couldn't wait to beat Yi Fei to death. Demon Yi, are you crazy? You're lucky that the divine dynasty didn't kill you. How dare you ask to borrow soldiers from the divine dynasty? Father, please allow us to kill this demon. Ignoring the clamor of the princes and the mockery of the others, Yi Fei just walked up to the heaven and earth altar with his hair draped over his shoulders and his sword in hand. A huge phantom of the ancient Emperor Crimson Moon suddenly appeared in the palace. Are you threatening me? It's not a threat. I'm just giving your majesty a chance to atone for your sins. If your majesty agrees, I'll remember this favor. If you don't agree, I'll make you pay for the blood debt of the human tribe, the heavenly palace of despair, and the spirit immortal tribe. Yi Fei didn't say this out loud. He was taking a gamble. He was betting that the more he said and the more secrets he revealed, the more the ancient Emperor Crimson Moon would be wary of him and think that he could summon the earthly emperor's spirit again. In the beast mark space, Xiao Chao's eyes turned red when he heard Yi Fei mention the blood debt of the spirit immortal tribe. He grabbed the dragon turtle's tail tightly and was ready to rush out and fight side by side with Yi Fei. However, the ancient Emperor Crimson Moon, who had always been cautious and even a little afraid of death, didn't dare to gamble like Yi Fei when he saw the heaven and earth altar gradually appearing. After all, Yi Fei was just a nobody who could gamble. The ancient Emperor Crimson Moon had a family and a business. He was also the ancient emperor. The ancient Emperor Crimson Moon only wanted to live a little longer and find the way to become a god. He had already lost the courage to risk his life. After a moment of silence, the ancient Emperor Crimson Moon made a compromise. "All right, I agree to let you borrow the troops. However, I have a condition." "What condition?" "It's not too late to discuss this condition after you resolve the crisis in Qingzhou. Zheng Tai, the Imperial College's Imperial Guards, listen up. I order you to lead the Imperial Guards and follow Yi Fei to Qingzhou to quell the rebellion. Although the Imperial College has declined, the Divine Land is still under my control." Chapter 2551. Chapter 2. The Last Retreat. They even sent the Yulin Royal Guards, the strongest force in the Divine Dynasty? That was the strongest army of the Divine Dynasty, and the Violet Dragon King was once a member of the Yulin Royal Guards. But now, he had been assigned to Yi Fei by the Emperor of the Ancients and was even under his command? Mo Fei. This brat is the same as the Amethyst Dragon King. Is he an illegitimate son that imperial father secretly nurtured? Many princes secretly gnashed their teeth. They hated Yi Fei even more. Lu Henmo and the other warriors of the demon state were full of admiration for Yi Fei. He was able to fight against Renzu and Emperor Weigu as a lord god. Just this action alone was enough to shock the world. Mad Warrior Renzu and Huali Renzu's expressions changed drastically. They wanted to leave the imperial city to report this shocking news to the Deathmatch Palace Master. At this moment, on the heaven and earth altar, Yi Fei ordered in a deep voice, "Zheng Tai of the Imperial College, listen up. Quickly take down these two Renzu for me. Don't make any mistakes." "Brat, how dare you!" Berserker Renzu and Huali Renzu were enraged. They had come here to see how Yi Fei would die. But in the end, Yi Fei didn't even cross the river before he started burning bridges. However, Zheng Tai didn't care about that. He knew very well how terrifying Yi Fei's backer was. After receiving the ancient emperor's order, Zheng Tai took out a tiger head commander's seal without hesitation. "Imperial Guards, listen up. Kill, kill, kill." The war drums shook the heavens, and the divine abilities illuminated the world. Troop after troop of soldiers charged towards the capital city of the Tianwu Kingdom from all directions. This capital city used to be the palace of the Baiyun nation. Later on, the Baiyun nation was occupied by Yi Fei and changed its name to the Tianwu Kingdom. This palace then became the headquarters of the Earth Domain. Not only were all the experts of the Earth Domain gathered here, but all the experts of the entire Qingzhou were also gathered here. Ever since the appearance of the heavenly martial kingdom, Emperor Zhao Xingxiong had great talent and strategy. With the assistance of the Quasi-Emperor of Tian Fa, the Supreme Dean, the Guardian Elder, and other experts of the older generation, as well as the support of Dongfang Yu, Lin Tianjiao, and the others, the heavenly martial kingdom had swept across the Green Province and was unrivaled. They had gradually created a true Iron Army. Coupled with the guidance of Rizu, the support of the heavenly Tao Tree Lord, Lord Ting Shi, Lord Pan Wang, and the others, the Green Province's techniques and remarkable abilities had already developed to a level that was not inferior to that of the Divine Prefecture. Other than the resources that the Green Province could not compare to, in terms of the combat strength of martial artists and the concentration of national power, The entire Tianwu kingdom could be said to have gathered the essence of the entire Earth domain and the Green Province. For a month, the allied forces of the Sword Palace and the Wind Cloud Palace attacked the imperial city of the Tianwu kingdom fiercely. However, they were defeated time and time again. The number of soldiers who died in the siege was even more than the total number of soldiers who died in the battle with the Qingzhou army in the wilderness. Not only did a large number of heavenly venerables and sovereigns die in this battle, but a large number of the Lord of Heaven and Tao lords also died in this battle. Even 2 divine lords in the allied forces were killed by Zhao Qianjun and Di Fan respectively. This greatly affected the morale of the army. However, the Tianwu kingdom had also paid a huge price to achieve this result. The entire Qingzhou army had lost 1/3 of its members, and a large number of Qingzhou experts who had been recruited over the years had also died. Most importantly, the resources of Qingzhou were too scarce. Not only were there few martial arts techniques, but it was also difficult to mine Xian stones and Xian veins. On the other hand, the allied forces of the Sword Palace and the Wind Cloud Palace had rich resources because they were backed by the Divine Land. They could have an endless supply of Xian stones and Xian veins, pills, and treasures to strengthen their attacks and boost their morale. However, although the Divine Land was strong, the Qingzhou side had Rizu and the 8-armed sword demon, Tu Renzu, as well as the Heavenly Path Tree Lord and the Lord Pan Palace, 2 super spiritual adhesion grandmasters who were proficient in the way of spiritual adhesion. There were also Tianjinzi, Dijinzi, and the Formation Fairy, 3 extremely abnormal array grandmasters. After the divine array in the Earth domain was combined with the spiritual adhesion in the Heaven domain, Tianjinzi and the other 2 array grandmasters had joined forces with the Heavenly Path Tree Lord and turned the entire Tianwu royal city into an eternal divine array that could withstand Renzu's attacks. This was also the reason why the allied forces had been defeated repeatedly. As long as they did not break this eternal divine array, they would not be able to break into the royal city and completely destroy the Tianwu kingdom and Qingzhou. However, even if the allied forces broke through the eternal divine array, the quasi-emperor of Tianfa had a last resort, which was for everyone to return to the Earth domain through the immortal spirit bridge built by the Heavenly Path Divine Tree. However, that would mean the failure of the entire Earth domain. No one could guarantee that everyone would have a chance to enter the Heaven domain after retreating to the Earth domain. Therefore, unless there was no other choice, no one was willing to use the last chance to retreat. Everyone was doing their best, hoping to withstand the Allied forces' attacks. There were also more people who were looking forward to Yi Fei's appearance. However, 10 days had passed, 1 month had passed, and 1.5 months had passed. Even with the eternal divine array, it was on the verge of collapse under the Allied forces' attacks. Yi Fei still had not appeared. Why hasn't the human emperor appeared yet? Many warriors of the Earth domain had begun to feel pessimistic. Could it be that the rumors of the Allied forces were true? That the witch emperor had died in the demon continent at the hands of the emperor of the ancients? Many wizards were doubtful, but there were also some who believed that Yi Fei was still alive. Xia Jun, Luo Xing, Yi Shanshan, and Dongfang Yu stood on the city wall every day, looking forward to Yi Fei's appearance. Yi Shaochan also stood on the city wall with her divine sword on her back. This stubborn sword goddess only hoped that if Yi Fei returned one day, he would be the first to see her waiting. Lu Qing and Bai Yanran did the same. As for the juniors like Mad Dog, Bai Shizhong, Zhao Qianjun, Fu Renjie, Pang Bei, and Long Xing, they had to go out of the city every day to fight with the geniuses of the Allied forces who were at the same level as them. They also shared part of the pressure of the Allied forces' siege. However, after more than a month of continuous fighting, even an Iron Man would be exhausted. On the other hand, the Allied forces continued to send Taoists and divine emperors to challenge them. The Allied forces' goal was simple. They wanted to exhaust Zhao Qianjun and the others, so that they would not have a chance to escape when the Allied forces besieged the city. Especially Di Fan, who was an innate saint, was the main target of the Allied forces. During this period, Di Fan fought fiercely with Zhang Feng and Naylan Shuiyao, and he was not at a disadvantage. In the end, even Jiang Hui could not help but intervene in the battle. However, he was almost killed by Di Fan. In their anger, Zhang Feng, Jiang Hui, and Naylan Shuiyao actually abandoned their previous enmity and joined forces to fight Di Fan in another battle. This made people feel as if they were reminded of 3 years ago on the Earth Emanations role. Zhang Feng and the other two had also joined forces to fight Yi Fei. In the end, Yi Fei became the first seat of the Earth Emanations role. However, in that battle, Zhang Feng and the other two were not convinced. They thought that Yi Fei was able to control the Emperor's celestial palace and open the land of the ancient god by relying on treasures and opportunistic means. If any of them could control the Emperor's celestial palace, they would be able to obtain better opportunities than Yi Fei. Chapter 2552. Beating the drums and slaughtering a city. The battle in the sky continued. Zhang Feng unleashed the Battle King's decree. This primordial sacred art had become even more terrifying after Zhang Feng had broken through to the monarch god realm. In battle, he seemed to have transformed into the Battle King, able to fight against the heavens and the earth. There was nothing he couldn't defeat. Beside Zhang Feng was Naylan Shuiyao, the hidden genius of the Naylan family. He had the bloodline of a half-demon. The primordial sacred art, the demon emperor scripture, seemed to have been prepared for him. Billowing demon aura surged, turning into countless roaring demon beasts. As they fought to their heart's content, Naylan Shuiyao roared. His eyes turned into a pair of ancient demon eyes. His demonic gaze seemed to be able to pierce through the heavens. We both cultivate the demon emperor scripture, but I can't transform into a real demon like this person. Long Xing sighed. He also cultivated the demon emperor scripture, but he was far inferior to Naylan Shuiyao. If he grows up, he can rival Naylan Shuiyao. Mad Dog and Bai Shizhong looked at the little fatty Pang Bei at the same time. If Naylan Shuiyao could transform into an ancient demon, then Pang Bei would be the king of demons. Unfortunately, Pang Bei's realm was inferior to Naylan Shuiyao's. If they hadn't taken care of him in the previous battle, he might have died at Naylan Shuiyao's hands. It was also for this reason that Pan Wang had strictly ordered them to keep an eye on Pang Bei. However, Mad Dog and Bai Shizhong didn't know that after defending for more than a month, when Tianwu Kingdom was about to be breached, Pan Wang had another plan besides moving to the Earth realm. That was to send the most outstanding group of young people out of Qingzhou and let them continue to develop in the Heaven realm. Among them were Mad Dog, Bai Shizhong, and Pang Bei. It's about time. The Alliance has been attacking for a month, but Yi Fei hasn't appeared. Even if he doesn't die, it will be difficult for him to rush to Qingzhou and turn the situation around. It's time to plan for the worst. Pan Wang looked at Rizu, only to see that the usually cowardly Rizu had an expression as if he was facing death with equanimity. I should have died in the battle of the Heavenly Palace. It's my fault for being cowardly. It's good enough that I've been able to survive until now. It's just that I've implicated Dao Brother. Rizu looked at the 8-armed sword demon, only to see that the 4 faces of the sword demon's runic puppet were cold and solemn. There's no such thing as being a burden. Helping Yi Fei is my own business. He's definitely still alive. It's just that we won't be able to see his glorious moment. Boom. The runic puppet's 8 arms all gripped the divine sword tightly. It raised the sword and pointed it towards the sky. This was the signal that the slovenly Taoist, Rizu, and Pan Wang had agreed on. Upon seeing this signal, Di Fan, who was fighting outside, would come over. However, this time Di Fan did not return. This was because when the slovenly Taoist sent out the signal, the Allied army also sent out a signal to Zhang Feng and the other two for the first time. Zhang Feng and Naylan Shui Yao turned a deaf ear to it. They used all their strength to fight Di Fan. However, Jiang Hui couldn't do so. His talent was originally a level lower than Zhang Feng and Naylan Shui Yao. Later on, he was defeated by Yi Fei and Yan Bing. As the strongest genius of the Deathmatch Palace, Jiang Hui couldn't bear the fate of being defeated by Di Fan again. Finally, Jiang Hui made a decision. He took out a pill and swallowed it. This pill was refined with Renzu's blood essence. It was also given to him by the evil sword Renzu and the wind and cloud Renzu. When he swallowed this pill, Jiang Hui's aura suddenly changed from the monarch god realm to the Renzu realm. His combat strength also increased greatly at this time. He became extremely powerful and could even unleash Renzu's attack. This kind of scene was unexpected. When Di Fan reacted, Jiang Hui's Renzu's attack had already landed on one of Di Fan's clones. It even exploded the clone with a punch. After losing this clone, Di Fan's combat strength decreased rapidly. Although Zhang Feng and Naylan Shui Yao were ashamed of Jiang Hui's actions, in the end, the Allied army was about to break through Qingzhou. They also had to contribute in order to get a share of the benefit. Zhang Feng immediately roared. His fists were like the sun as he unleashed the Battle Sage Fist. It was as if the Battle King had come back to life and was filled with great pressure. Naylan Shui Yao also roared. At this moment, he seemed to have completely transformed into an ancient demon. His entire body was filled with demon qi. Countless sharp claws tore through the sky and surrounded Di Fan. Oh no, the Allied army is cheating. Di Fan is in danger. The slovenly Taoist was the first to sense that something was wrong. He controlled the rune puppet and rushed out of the imperial city without hesitation. Finally willing to come out. I have already said that as long as we trap their important figures, these traitors will come out of the imperial city. It's too bad that Zhang Feng and Naylan Shui Yao are too arrogant and did not carry out my plan. Evil Sword Renzu was very dissatisfied. If Jiang Hui, Zhang Feng, and Naylan Shui Yao all swallowed the realm explosion pill made from Renzu's blood at the same time, then not only would Di Fan's clone explode, but all three of his clones would die together. At that time, only his original body would be left, and any monarch god would be able to capture and kill Di Fan. However, Jiang Hui's cooperation still allowed Evil Sword Renzu to seize the opportunity to kill Di Fan. Between heaven and earth, an evil sword flew across the sky, wanting to kill Di Fan. How dare you, evil sword! At this critical moment, the slovenly Taoist controlled the rune puppet to block the evil sword light. But at this moment, Evil Sword Renzu's face suddenly sneered. As he pointed his sword forward, the evil sword light suddenly changed direction. It was originally aimed at Di Fan, but now it was aimed at the slovenly Taoist. Even the slovenly Taoist was caught off guard. 3 of the rune puppet's arms were shattered by the evil sword light. Inside the puppet, the slovenly Taoist could not help but vomit blood. He was no longer able to control the puppet and use Renzu's power. After all, the slovenly Taoist had cut off his own cultivation. He was no longer Renzu. His combat power was completely dependent on the rune puppet. At this moment, Evil Sword Renzu used the evil sword to attack and destroy the rune puppet. Naturally, the slovenly Taoist could not continue to resist. Ha ha ha, Long Tuo, you are indeed old and useless. Back then, you lowered your own cultivation base because you were a brute. Now that the sword's gate is gone, and the divine inscription's puppet has been destroyed, let's see what face you, the old dog slave of the 9 heavens sword sovereign, have left to contend against me. Evil Sword Renzu seemed to have a huge amount of resentment. This resentment made the evil sword stronger and more evil. It slashed out again, trying to trap Di Fan and the slovenly Taoist together. In the distance, Renzu clapped his hands and laughed. Brother Jian, you have a good plan. As long as we trap the old and the young, Tianwu Kingdom's resistance will be broken. Everyone, break through Tianwu Kingdom and destroy Qingzhou. Today is the day. Beat the drums and massacre the city. Kill, kill, kill. Chapter 2553. Kill without mercy. In the Crimson Moon Imperial City, the Imperial College's Vice-Chancellor, Zheng Tai, issued an order. 3,000 Imperial Guards appeared and bowed to Yi Fei with Renzu in their hands. Imperial Guards, report to young Master Yi. Yi-mo, you will die a horrible death. It's not enough that you have offended the Sword Palace and the Storm Palace. Do you want to offend the Deathmatch Palace as well? Huali Renzu and Berserker Renzu were forced to kneel in front of Yi Fei by the Imperial Guards. As Renzu, how could they tolerate this? They were fuming with anger. Berserker Renzu was so angry that he vomited blood. Yi Fei wasn't angry when he heard this. He looked at them with a pleasant expression and said, I don't want to offend the Deathmatch Palace. You guys better not offend me either. Open the Immortal Essence Gate and let me return to Qingzhou immediately. Oh right, Lord Jing, I don't think I have to pay for the teleportation fees, right? How could we? His Majesty asked us to go to war with young Master, so we should bear all the expenses. Zheng Tai forced a smile. The princes of the Divine Dynasty were all furious. The Imperial Guards were the strongest army of the Divine Dynasty. Not only did Yi Fei borrow them, but he was also stingy. The princes were furious. If it wasn't for the ancient emperor's order, and if they didn't suspect that Yi Fei might be the illegitimate son of the Crimson Moon ancient emperor like the Amethyst Dragon King and Yang Dingtian, the princes would have stomped their feet. As for Evil Sword Renzu and Berserker Renzu, who had their immortal essence gates taken away, they were so angry that smoke came out of their nostrils. They looked at Yi Fei angrily and sullenly as he took away their immortal essence gates, refined them, and set up the gate to Qingzhou. Boom! The region gate Yi Fei had opened was coincidentally in the middle of the battlefield between the Alliance Army and Tianwu Imperial City. As the region gate opened, the Alliance Army cheered loudly. After all, opening a region gate in the middle of the Alliance Army meant that the other party was on the Alliance Army's side. Everyone in the Qingzhou Army was in despair. They were already weak against the Allied forces and could only rely on the eternal divine matrix to resist. Now the Allied forces had strong reinforcement. It seemed that the last chance of victory for Qingzhou had disappeared. The Renhuang that Qingzhou had placed high hopes on still had not appeared. The Tian Fa Quasi-Emperor and the Grand Supreme Dean both sighed. Lu Qing and Yi Shanshan's eyes were also filled with tears. Qingzhou is in such a dangerous situation, and he still hasn't appeared. Could it be that Master won't die? He must still be alive. Yi Shaochan stubbornly stood at the top of the city wall. She stood at the most dangerous and conspicuous place. She was filled with stubbornness and a trace of hope that was gradually extinguishing. However, just as this trace of hope was about to be extinguished by the cheers of the Allied forces, Yi Shaochan, Lu Qing, and Bai Yanran's hearts suddenly skipped a beat. Ling Siki hugged a large machete and looked in the direction of the region gate in surprise. Little Guogua? The cheers of the Allied forces suddenly stopped. Everyone looked in disbelief at the region gate in the middle of the battlefield. They saw a figure in a purple-gold battle robe striding out. Behind this figure were Long Guang, Long Jiaojiao, Lu Henmo, and a large group of demon state martial artists. Qingzhou, I'm back! Stepping out of the region gate and looking at the familiar yet strange battlefield, Yi Fei was overwhelmed with emotions. Long Guang and Long Jiaojiao were also very excited. This was because they saw the half-dragon man in battle and the previous clan leader, who was controlling the broken divine pattern puppet and fighting desperately with Evil Sword Renzu. Evil Sword Renzu also immediately noticed Yi Fei. His eyes were filled with extreme shock. How is this possible? Shouldn't Yi Mo have died on Celestial Demon Mountain? I'm sorry to disappoint you, Evil Sword Renzu. Last time I was forced to leave the Sword Palace, Evil Sword Renzu, you seem to have slashed me once. I'll remember that. Yi Fei smiled, then suddenly stared at Feng Yun Renzu with a dark gaze. You're Renzu from Feng Yun Palace? Have you forgotten my agreement with Feng Yun? As long as I'm alive, Feng Yun Palace can't step into Qingzhou. It's not too late to take your people and scram. Yi Mo, how dare you? In the distance, Lord Bai Yun was both shocked and angry. Feng Yun Renzu smiled and waved his hand magnanimously. The destruction of our country is right in front of us. It's understandable that he's cursing. As Renzu, we're high above the masses and enjoy the respect of tens of thousands of people. Why should we be so calculative with a dead dog? Just kill him. Boom. Feng Yun Renzu instantly charged at Yi Fei. His attack was fast and ruthless. You have an agreement with Feng Yun, but you don't have an agreement with me. Killing you is as easy as slaughtering a dog. Feng Dio, you've gone too far. Suddenly, the forefather Jing Tai emerged from within the domain gate, radiating the might of the forefather of all humanity. He blocked the attack of the forefather Wind and Cloud, which was aimed at Yi Fei. Feng Yun Renzu was shocked. Renzu, who are you? The Emperor of the Ancients was threatened and had no choice but to lend his troops to Yi Fei. This was a very embarrassing matter. How could Jing Tai Renzu make such a big fuss about it? Not only him, but all the Imperial Guards who crossed the Celestial Gate took off their armor and put on their masks, not showing their true faces. As such, Jing Tai Renzu naturally didn't say anything. He only looked at Yi Fei, waiting for Yi Fei's orders. Looking at the crumbling Tianwu Imperial City, Yi Fei's face turned cold. Pass down my order. Kill all the remaining members of the Alliance Army. Young Master Yi orders that all members of the Alliance Army are to be killed. The low sound of a bugle horn resounded through the sky. Following Yi Fei's order, groups of black-clothed soldiers got into formation and drove their chariots. They unleashed their mystiques and unleashed their killing intent. When this killing intent gathered together, it formed countless killing beams. Wherever the beams passed, the Alliance Army's soldiers would immediately fall, killed mercilessly. And these were all people of Jianghu. The Emperor of Jianghu, who was in charge of the Alliance Army, roared, Yi Mo, it's not enough that you killed my crown prince. How dare you kill my soldiers? Men, sound the drums. All troops, attack and kill Yi Mo. Kill, 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 kill. The Alliance Army soldiers weren't frightened by the Imperial Royal Guards. Instead, they got into formation and clashed with the Imperial Royal Guards like two waves of steel. Further away in the sky, Evil Sword Renzu suddenly opened its vertical eye and looked at Yi Fei coldly. Although you're strong, you've offended too many factions. Today you must die. That's not necessarily true. Evil Sword Renzu, your opponent is me. Lightning flashed in the sky as a heavily injured lightning beast charged out of Tianwu Imperial City. Yi Fei, you've returned at the right time. Save Defan first, then destroy the Alliance Army. Defan? This guy had also returned and had broken through to the Monarch God level? Only then did Yi Fei see a purple figure in the billowing demonic aura. It was constantly dodging and evading Zhan Feng and Naylan Shui's attacks. However, while Defan could block the mystiques of people at the same level as him, he couldn't block Jiang Hui, who had taken the Realm Burst pill. Chapter 2554. The Sun and the Moon Fall. Bang! Defan tried his best to resist, but he was still no weaker than Jiang Hui, Zhan Feng, and Nalan Shuiyao. The three golden bodies of morality were all destroyed, and even his main body was severely injured. Fortunately, I managed to hold on until Yi Fei returned. With him around, I can die without regrets. Defan closed his eyes and waited for death to come. At this moment, a huge destructive sword radiance turned into a Tai Chi symbol and blocked in front of Defan. Then, Yi Fei's cold voice entered Defan's ears. "Brother D, you've worked hard. Leave the rest to me. Be careful. The three of them have extraordinary talents and special elixirs that can unleash Rinzu's attack. Why don't you and I work together? Maybe we have a chance to win." Defan spat out blood and struggled to fight. Suddenly, a black mouth stretched out and bit one of Defan's legs. It dragged him away as if it was afraid that he could not run fast enough. Jiang Hui, Zhan Feng, and Nalan Shui were all enraged by this scene. "It's you again, you stupid black turtle." Back in the land of the ancient god, it was the dragon turtle that had caused them to miss a chance to kill Yi Fei. Now, the black turtle had actually dared to appear again. Jiang Hui was enraged as he unleashed the power of Rinzu once again. After consuming the realm burst elixir, Jiang Hui seemed to have really transformed into Rinzu. His martial arts mystiques had all improved explosively. Zhan Feng and Nalan Shuiyao looked at each other. Suddenly, they did the same thing. Like Jiang Hui, they took out exploding realm pills and swallowed them. "Yi Fei, the disgrace of the Earth Carnage Proclamation, we must make you pay it back." After Nalan Shui consumed the bursting realm pill, his entire person seemed to have transformed into a human-shaped ancient demon. His attacks became even more terrifying. He was like an ancient demon that could move unhindered between heaven and earth. Kill! Invincible Battle King! Zhan Feng's chi and blood soared into the sky like a golden war king. His fists split the sky, his feet crushed the earth, his body was like the sun, and his chi was like thunder. At the same time, the terrifying sacred battle fist also underwent a shocking transformation, becoming the strongest sacred battle fist of the immemorial battle monarch. He wanted to crush Yi Fei in an unrivaled manner. Seeing this scene, the Supreme Headmaster, the Tianfa Quasi-Emperor, Xia Jun, Pang Bei, Dongfang Yu, and the others all broke out in a cold sweat. After all, Yi Fei was the hope of the Tianwu Kingdom and the Azure Province. If Yi Fei was defeated, the Tianwu Kingdom would suffer a crushing defeat as well. Defan even disregarded his injuries and burned his own saint's blood to increase his battle prowess. He wanted to help Yi Fei share some of the pressure. However, Yi Fei's ancient godlike roar could be heard from the void. The tyrannical ancient god golden body bloomed with dazzling light, blocking the double attacks of Zhan Feng and Nalan Shuiyao. At the same time, Yi Fei's fists suddenly shone like stars. "Jiang Hui, I let you off once on the Earth Emanations leaderboard, but I won't let you off a second time. I want you to die for everything you did to Defan and the Azure Province." Boom! Heaven and earth collapsed, and the sun and moon fell. Intense light from the 7 stars came from the void and surrounded Yi Fei's body. Yi Fei had used the Death Battle Palace's strongest technique, the Big Dipper Mystical Fist. When this fist technique was used, the terrifying fist radiance blasted a huge black hole in heaven and earth. The eyes of many spectating forces almost popped out of their sockets. It wasn't that they hadn't seen the Big Dipper Mystical Fist before, and Jiang Hui had used it more than once. However, Jiang Hui's Big Dipper Mystical Fist was definitely not as terrifying as Yi Fei's. This was because Jiang Hui had only used his profound energy to activate the Big Dipper Mystical Fist. On the other hand, Yi Fei didn't only have profound energy, he also had a trace of the ancient god's power. It was also this unique power that made Yi Fei's Big Dipper Mystical Fist so terrifying. It was like the 7 great ancient stars of the immemorial era, descending from the starry sky and killing enemies. This is impossible. I have studied the Big Dipper mystical fist for 30 years. Could it be that you have secretly learned it for 3 years? I don't believe it, I refuse to accept it. Kill Big Dipper chain. Jiang Hui had suffered a huge blow. At this moment, he was actually burning his bloodline recklessly while consuming the realm burst elixir to increase the power of his Big Dipper mystical fist. Even so, his Big Dipper mystical fist's radiance was still completely crushed by the ancient god radiance contained in Yi Fei's Big Dipper mystical fist. The moment the 2 fists collided like stars, Jiang Hui's Big Dipper 7 stars all exploded. However, Yi Fei still had 3 ancient stars left. With a murderous aura, he struck down furiously. In the end, you aren't the real Renzu. You can unleash Renzu's attack power, but your willpower and superpowers are too weak. Hearing this, Zhan Feng and Nayland Shui Yao's expressions turned ugly. Indeed, the realm burst elixir could allow them to temporarily break through Renzu's realm, but this realm was very unstable. They could directly crush ordinary divine emperors, but against an invincible divine emperor like Yi Fei, their advantage was very weak. Sensing Yi Fei's murderous aura, Jiang Hui suddenly felt a strong sense of fear in his heart. No, you can't kill me. Palace Lord, save me. The strong sense of fear finally made Jiang Hui take out his life-saving treasure, which was the projection of the Quasi-Emperor's doppelganger. As the scroll unfurled, the projection of the Deathmatch Palace Lord's doppelganger walked out furiously. Stop, Jiang Hui, you can't kill. Shut your dog mouth. I can't kill him, but am I supposed to let him kill me and kill my best friend? Cram. The terrifying ancient star disappeared. A terrifying black cauldron appeared in the void. It was the cauldron of the ghost god Yi Fei's greatest weapon against Renzu. When Yi Fei grabbed this cauldron, which was as big as a mountain, and threw it out furiously, the entire sky was smashed to pieces by this terrifying cauldron. The projection of the Deathmatch Palace Lord's doppelganger exploded in the air. The moment the projection disappeared, the Deathmatch Palace Lord saw Jiang Hui's body being instantly smashed into a pile of meat paste by the ghost god's cauldron. At the same time, a deep and ancient divine language came out of Yi Fei's mouth. Although he was furious, Yi Fei didn't forget to plunder Jiang Hui's bloodline. He immediately used the Azura blood bead, which contained strong bloodline fluctuations, and it fell into Yi Fei's hands. Demon, he's a complete demon. Some of the forces watching the battle were so frightened by Yi Fei's terrifying methods that their legs turned to jelly. After taking the Realm Burst pill, Zhan Feng and Nayland Shui, who were originally full of confidence, felt their hands and feet turn cold. At the beginning of the battle, no one had expected that the powerful Jiang Hui would die like this. Moreover, Yi Fei was so crazy that he didn't even give face to a quasi-emperor like the Deathmatch Palace Lord. Crazy, he's completely crazy. Even if we don't do anything, he won't live for long. Nayland Shui, let's go. Facing the same enemy and fighting together, Zhan Feng and Nayland Shui undoubtedly became close friends. When they saw Yi Fei smash Jiang Hui to death with the cauldron, Zhan Feng and Nayland Shui decisively turned around and left the battlefield. Chapter 2555 Lu Baiyun's Death by Yun God, I'll take your life. The Guatian cauldron glowed brightly and formed a Guatian door. Yi Fei stepped on the Guatian cauldron and charged toward Bai Yun God, bypassing countless superpowers. Bai Yun God's face darkened. Evil Sword Renzu and Renzu of the Wind and Cloud were furious. After all, Bai Yun God was the former monarch of the Baiyun nation. If Bai Yun God was still alive, it would be reasonable for them to help Bai Yun God take back his homeland. But if Bai Yun God died, they would have no justification. The two Renzu of the Wind and Cloud couldn't accept such a result. Unfortunately, Renzu of the Wind and Cloud was blocked by Zheng Tai and Renzu of the Wind and Cloud, and Evil Sword Renzu couldn't break free from the attacks of Rizu's Thunder Beast. All they could do was look at Yin Tianjin and Li Moran and yell, "Yin Tianjin, Li Moran, you have to stop this person no matter what." As they spoke, the two Renzu of the Wind and Cloud each took out a Realm Explosion pill and threw it to them, hoping that they could use Renzu's cultivation to block Yi Fei's attack. Li Moran and Yin Tianjin, who hated Yi Fei, didn't hesitate. They took the Realm Explosion pills and swallowed them immediately. The terrifying power of Renzu exploded from their bodies. "Yimo, today is the day you die." Bai Yun God roared in fear. He also took out a Realm Explosion pill and swallowed it. He was different from Zhan Feng and Nailan Shuiyao. Bai Yun God and Li Moran were both senior Renzu. They had been Renzu for many years and were in the late Renzu realm. The power of Renzu they could unleash would only be stronger. Li Moran displayed the God King's chaotic world. Li Moran's entire being seemed to have turned into a terrifying God King, slashing the world with his saber and slaying gods and devils. On the other side, Bai Yun Divine Lord was equally ruthless. He conjured countless wind, rain, and thunder. Suddenly, the wind and rain transformed into countless blade flashes that could tear apart the world and disperse a warrior's sky palace and soul. This was Wind and Cloud Hall's ultimate technique, wind and rain thunder. It could condense the power of celestial phenomenon and turn it into a killing technique. Seeing this scene, Yin Tianjin's confidence was boosted. He was no longer afraid of the cauldron of ghosts and deities. Instead, he erupted with the most resplendent yin-yang divine light, reversing yin and yang and shattering heaven and earth. He attacked Yi Fei from the side. "Yimo, your time has come." Seeing so many divine sovereigns targeting Yi Fei, Nailan Shuiyao, who had already escaped, suddenly returned from afar. In the entire divine prefecture, Feng Yun was already pressuring them to the point of suffocation. Now, they definitely did not want another Feng Yun to appear in the divine prefecture. The only way was to unite everyone's strength and kill Yi Fei. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the Grand Supreme Dean and the others changed abruptly. Rizu and the slovenly Taoist also roared. After all, no matter how strong Yi Fei's cauldron of ghosts and deities was, he was only a divine lord. Yi Fei could resist Renzu, but how could he resist so many divine lords who had swallowed the realm burst elixir and could unleash Renzu's attack? It seems that the outcome of this battle is already decided. Yi Fei's performance is amazing, but the foundations of Sword Palace and Wind and Cloud Hall are still too strong. After all, Sword Palace was one of the top 10 forces in the Divine Prefecture. Due to the rise of Feng Yun, Wind and Cloud Hall was gradually on par with the top 10 forces. On the other hand, although Qingzhou had many warriors with potential, it was at an absolute disadvantage in terms of foundation. This was also the reason why Yi Fei had taken the risk to borrow troops from the ancient Emperor of Crimson Moon. Yi Fei knew very well that even if he rushed back to Qingzhou with the strength in his hands, he would not be able to resolve the crisis in Qingzhou. If he wanted Qingzhou to be safe, he had to have the strength to match the top 10 forces in the Divine Prefecture. Where are the commanders of the Imperial Royal Guards? Yi Fei's loud roar suddenly came from the void. Following his roar, 4 people in frost iron battle armor suddenly walked out of the Immortal Essence Gate that had been open all this time. Unlike the other masked Imperial Royal Guards, these 4 people did not bother to cover their faces. This was because they were the strongest commanders of the Imperial Royal Guards and the most loyal subordinates of the ancient Emperor of Crimson Moon. Originally, Yi Fei did not want to use this force. He had decided to save it for when he attacked Sword Palace and Wind and Cloud Hall. However, the threat of Evil Sword Renzu and Wind and Cloud Renzu, as well as the siege of Bai Yun God and the others, finally angered Yi Fei. The 4 commanders of the Imperial Royal Guards? How is this possible? Why are you helping Yi Fei? Seeing these 4 people, the entire alliance was in an uproar. However, the 4 of them did not make a sound. The moment they appeared, they unleashed the power of Renzu and attacked Li Moran, Yin Tianjin, Zhan Feng, and Nayland Shuiyao. As for Bai Yun God, they did not attack him. This was because Yi Fei had already driven the ghost deity cauldron and rushed towards Bai Yun God after he had shown his trump card. "Yimo, I'm going to fight you to the death today." Knowing that there was no way out today, Bai Yun God simply burned his bloodline and soul. He began to fight with all his might. The 8 storms, together with lightning and thunder, slashed towards Yi Fei. However, Yi Fei did not even look at it. His body continued to emit the dazzling ancient god golden body. This golden body allowed Yi Fei, who was in the Divine Lord realm, to block Renzu's attack. At the same time, the ghost deity cauldron under Yi Fei's feet emitted a dazzling light. This cauldron allowed Yi Fei, who was in the Divine Lord realm, to unleash power comparable to Renzu's. This combination of attack and defense allowed Yi Fei to completely ignore Bai Yun God's attack. The moment they clashed, a divine cauldron was already shining with the light of the 9 serenities. It shattered the void and also shattered Bai Yun God's lightning. Kill! Yi Fei's angry roar shook the void and tore the lightning apart. Everything started because of you, so it should end because of you. Old dog Bai Yun, do you remember what I said? If you have any problems, come at me, not my family. Boom. The huge ghost deity cauldron was raised and smashed towards Bai Yun God continuously. Bai Yun God used all his strength to try and block it, but the power of the ghost deity cauldron was too terrifying. This was a soul cauldron that was personally formed by the ghost emperor and refined by an ancient god. Its power was so terrifying that even the real Renzu would find it difficult to block it, let alone Bai Yun God, who was just a fake Renzu who had swallowed a realm-burst elixir to forcibly raise his cultivation level. In the void, Yi Fei's ghost deity cauldron only attacked 3 times. The first attack broke the mystique, the second shattered the protective dark energy, and the last attack directly destroyed Bai Yun God's true body in front of everyone's horrified eyes. Bam! Chapter 2556. Evil Sword Doomsday. This scene deeply shocked Zhan Feng and Nayland Shui. They had thought that they would be able to kill Yi Fei if they joined forces. After all, no matter how talented Yi Fei was, he would no longer be a threat if he died. However, no one had expected that there would be more than one Yi Fei hiding behind him. There were a total of 5 human ancestors. In particular, the identities of these Renzu were so special. They were the 4 commanders of the Crimson Moon Divine Dynasty's Yulin Royal Guards. Since the commanders were here, the identity of the masked army in black, who had helped Yi Fei in the battle, was obvious. It's the Yulin Royal Guards of the Crimson Moon Divine Dynasty, the strongest army in the Divine Prefecture. Strange, doesn't the Crimson Moon Divine Dynasty hate Yi Fei to the core? Why would they lend their troops to Yi Fei this time? Could it be that this is a ploy by the Crimson Moon Divine Dynasty and Yimo so that the Divine Dynasty can besiege the Sword Palace and the Storm Palace to weaken their strength? No matter what, this Battle of Qingzhou is really unexpected. If Qingzhou is not destroyed and Yi Fei does not die, he will definitely be in the Divine Prefecture. He will shine brightly and become another Storm Palace. Look, the 4 commanders are attacking the evil sword Renzu together. Boom! The heavens and earth roared and exploded in all directions. The 4 commanders did not completely obey Yi Fei's orders to kill everyone in the Alliance army. Instead, they were specifically targeting Renzu of the Sword Palace. Although Yi Fei was dissatisfied, he understood the commander's concerns. After all, the strongest and most promising person in the Divine Prefecture was Storm Palace, the one who could break through Rinzhu and become an emperor of the ancients. If the Crimson Moon Divine Dynasty pressured the Storm Palace too much now, once Storm Palace grew and became an emperor of Rinzhu, it would definitely bring great disaster to the Crimson Moon Divine Dynasty. However, when facing the Sword Palace, they did not have such misgivings. After all, the current Sword Palace had been divided into two factions after the disappearance of the Nine Heavens Sword Master. The collapse of the Sword School had caused the Sword Palace's power to be greatly weakened. The Sword Palace was known as one of the top 10 forces in the Divine Prefecture, but it no longer lived up to its name. The Crimson Moon Holy Court naturally did not care much about Evil Sword Rinzhu. In fact, they were more than happy to kill Evil Sword Rinzhu and kick the Sword Palace out of the top 10 forces. Yi Fei wasn't the only one who understood this. As the leader of the Outer Sword Palace, Rinzhu the Evil Sword Rinzhu quickly realized why the four commanders had attacked him. Human ancestor Evil Sword could not help but feel great grief and indignation. He had become the human ancestor and controlled the Outer Sword Palace. It could be said that he could do anything he wanted, but in the end, he had fallen at the hands of Yi Fei. Crimson Moon Divine Dynasty, you are clearly asking a tiger for its skin by colluding with Yimo. I will definitely avenge myself today. Seeing that the situation was hopeless, Rinzhu the Evil Sword immediately abandoned the Allied forces and tried to escape by himself. After all, if the Allied forces were destroyed, they could gather again. As long as he was alive, the Outer Sword Palace would not be finished. Where do you think you are going, Evil Sword Rinzhu? Your end is here. Suddenly, Zheng Tai, who had been fighting with Rinzhu the Wind, attacked from behind and surrounded Evil Sword Rinzhu. As for Rinzhu the Wind, he seemed to have reached an agreement with Zheng Tai and quickly retreated with the Divine Lords of the Wind Cloud Palace. Bai Yun the Divine Lord is dead. From now on, the Wind Cloud Palace will never set foot in Qingzhou. These were the words Rinzhu the Wind had said before he retreated. It was also the most helpless compromise he had made to Yi Fei and the Crimson Moon Divine Dynasty. The Wind Cloud Palace had mobilized a large force to take back Qingzhou, but in the end they had suffered great losses. Rinzhu the Wind felt as if his old face had been slapped swollen. Rinzhu the Evil Sword looked at Yi Fei in despair. There was no anger in his eyes, only deep sorrow and grievance. Yi Fei, I would rather die than fall into your hands. Evil Sword Explosion. The evil sword in his hand opened its vertical eye and revealed a sorrowful expression. Then, Rinzhu the Evil Sword buried the evil sword with his own body and used his sword to kill the enemy. A terrifying aura spread in all directions and killed countless warriors from both sides. This cruelty and viciousness made Yi Fei furious. Evil Sword Rinzhu, you are too cruel. You slashed me with your sword that day. Today I will return the favor. Before Rinzhu the Evil Sword could self-destruct, the Immortal Sword token had already turned into a huge black gold divine sword. It cut through the void and stabbed into Evil Sword Rinzhu's body. The powerful sword aura immediately suppressed Evil Sword Rinzhu's self-destruction. At the same time, a terrifying ancient god power had already refined Evil Sword Rinzhu's blood essence before the four commanders could fight over Evil Sword Rinzhu's corpse. Another drop of Azura blood pearl filled with Evil Sword's aura fell into Yi Fei's hands. Seeing this, Zhan Feng and Nalan Shuiyao both looked fearful. Although they were unwilling, they still ran for their lives. Yin Tianjin also ran away. At this moment, Yin Tianjin regretted provoking Yi Fei and coming to Qingzhou. But it was too late for regrets. Without waiting for Yin Tianjin to run out of his sight, Yi Fei immediately used the Azure Dragon Wings and appeared behind Yin Tianjin. Yin Tianjin, it's time to settle our scores. No, Yi Fei, I was wrong. As long as you let me go, I can give you anything. Feeling the terrifying sword might behind him, Yin Tianjin knew that he could not escape as quickly as Zhan Feng and Nalan Shuiyao. Without caring about his face, he knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Yi Fei, begging for mercy. But looking at the corpses of the Tianwu Kingdom soldiers and the people in Qingzhou, Yi Fei had no intention of letting Yin Tianjin go. The black gold divine sword in his hand had already drawn a line of blood on Yin Tianjin's neck. Yin Tianjin, who was kowtowing, suddenly clutched his throat tightly and looked at Yi Fei with fear and hatred. Then, he felt that his blood was being stripped away by a mysterious ancient god power. It turned into a drop of azure blood pearl and fell into Yi Fei's hand. The rank 9 Yin-Yang bloodline and the evil sword Renzu's evil sword bloodline. These two bloodlines are not bad. Xiaochan, choose one. From now on, you are also a bloodline martial artist. After killing Yin Tianjin and Renzu's escape and death, the allied army was destroyed. Yi Fei did not care about the battle outside. Instead, he rushed up the city walls of Tianwu Royal City. Yi Xiaochan, Yi Shanshan, Lu Qing, Bai Yanran, and many others looked at Yi Fei with tears in their eyes. However, no one took the initiative to speak to him. Instead, they all looked at Yi Xiaochan. In the years that Yi Fei had disappeared, only Yi Xiaochan stubbornly believed that Yi Fei was still alive. She stood at the top of the city gates, stubbornly waiting for Yi Fei. Yi Fei would give her the best bloodline just because of their strong relationship as master and disciple. However, looking at the two bloodlines, Yi Xiaochan's eyes did not show any excitement. She only threw herself into Yi Fei's arms with tears in her eyes and said loudly, "Master, I don't want the bloodline. I just want you to be safe." Chapter 2557. Ruins of the Ancient Sect. Master, these bloodlines are not my own. If they are not my own, there will never be room for improvement. Rather than being confined to someone else's bloodline, I would rather use the sword in my hand to carve out my own path. Yi Fei realized that after so many years, the little girl who used to be on the verge of death had really grown up and matured. She had her own thoughts and beliefs, and Yi Fei could not object to this belief. Moreover, he believed that with Yi Xiaochan's tenacity and comprehension, she would definitely become an expert of her generation even without a bloodline. Moreover, since she was his disciple, how could Yi Fei really let Yi Xiaochan die? Since Yi Xiaochan did not want a bloodline, Yi Fei had already decided to give the complete ancient god golden body to this disciple. After all, the ancient god golden body itself had great potential. Perhaps through the ancient god golden body, Yi Xiaochan could borrow the power of the ancient gods and give birth to a bloodline that belonged to her. Therefore, Yi Fei did not say anything else. He just carried Yi Xiaochan and walked into the void. He would impart the specific technique of the ancient god golden body to this disciple in the void. Seeing this scene, the wounded Rizu could not help but feel envious. I heard that this kid entered the land of the ancient god. He must have obtained the complete ancient god golden body. It's a pity that he did not impart it to me, but only to his disciple. Thunderdog, you should be content. Yi Fei has killed the Amethyst Dragon King, which can be considered as taking revenge for our heavenly palace of despair. As for the ancient god golden body, that kind of cultivation technique isn't something ordinary people can cultivate. It's enough for us to know about it, but we mustn't speak of it. Pan King stood beside Lightning Ancestor. He was bathed in blood, having killed many Sword Palace divine monarchs who had escaped. Among them, maybe Shinjun had died at the hands of Pan Wang. However, the one who suffered the heaviest losses was still the army of Jiangwo. The Emperor of Jiangwo wanted to avenge Jian Sanxing, so he did not hesitate to use the power of the entire country to fight. He even led the coalition army. Unfortunately, in the face of Renzu's defeat and the collapse of the coalition army, the Emperor of Jiangwo's army also suffered a disaster. The emperor of the Sword Country was filled with remorse and self-blame the moment his army was defeated. He swung his sword and committed suicide, causing many martial artists to sigh deeply. While teaching Yi Shaochan, Yi Fei sensed the commotion below with his divine sense. He shook his head slightly. He had a grudge with the Jian Sanxing, but that grudge had dissipated with the destruction of the alliance and the suicide of the Jian country's emperor. This person's corpse is not to be dishonored. Give him a proper burial. Yi Fei's voice came down from the sky. The Yulin guards who were about to cut off the emperor's head immediately stopped. Zhao Xing, who was also an emperor, personally ordered people to build a coffin and bury the emperor. Yi Fei did not ask about what happened after that. He just entered Tianwu Imperial City and went to the best restaurant in the city to drink with a group of friends. The dragon turtle also came with Di Fan. After a period of recuperation, Di Fan's expression was clearly much better. However, when he saw Yi Fei, Di Fan's expression was inevitably complicated. After all, he had only been able to fight Zhang Feng and the other two with all his strength and barely survive. On the other hand, Yi Fei had returned and suppressed Zhang Feng. He had even killed Jiang Hui and Yin Tianjin, two great experts. This also proved that he was still inferior to Yi Fei. However, Di Fan was not discouraged by this. Instead, he said with fighting spirit, "Yi Fei, although I lost this time, I will definitely catch up to you next time." "Brother Di, don't say that. Actually, I'm only slightly stronger than you." Yi Fei was very modest. However, this kind of modesty made Zhao Qianjun and the others think of how terrifying Yi Fei was when he defeated the quasi-emperor's projection. They could not help but have strange expressions. Di Fan snorted. "It's a miracle that you haven't been beaten to death by someone with such modesty. By the way, I heard that you obtained the ancient god's opportunity. Have you heard of the ruins of the ancient sect in the Divine Prefecture?" "Ruins of the ancient sect? What kind of place is that?" Hearing this, Yi Fei was obviously interested. Zhao Qianjun and Fu Renjie also pricked up their ears. The army of destruction asked bluntly, "Di Fan, could it be that your breakthrough to the Divine Lord level has something to do with this ancient sect?" After all, before they left the Divine Prefecture, Yi Fei and Di Fan were not very different from the rest. Yi Fei's rapid progress in cultivation was due to the ancient god's opportunity. In that case, Di Fan's rapid progress in cultivation inevitably made people think that it had something to do with the ancient sect. That's right. The reason why I could break through so quickly is related to the ancient sect. That place seems to be the most secretive place in the Divine Prefecture. At the same time as the Earth Carnage Roll Contest, the ruins of the ancient sect will also open at the same time. However, this point is only known to the upper echelons of the top 10 forces. I managed to sneak in by chance and did not participate in the Earth Carnage Roll Contest. Instead, I directly entered the ruins of the ancient sect. As he spoke, Di Fan took out an ancient map. This is a map of the ancient sect that I obtained from a divine lord who died in battle at the Royal Soldier Mountain. The ancient sect seems to have two parts. One part is open to those below the Divine Lord level, while the other part is open to those above the Divine Lord level. I came back this time to invite people to enter the inner sect of the ancient sect to explore the ruins. I did not expect that I would coincide with the crisis in the Divine Prefecture. Only then did everyone know the reason why Di Fan could break through so quickly. Yi Fei could not help but be greatly interested. If Di Fan could obtain the opportunity to break through to the Divine Lord level in the outer sect, then what would the inner sect have? Senior brother Zhao, what do you think? Yi Fei thought for a while and looked at Zhao Qianjun. Zhao Qianjun did not even think and already nodded. It is said that the ancient sect is a sect that once gave birth to an ancient god. There is also a rumor in the Demon Prefecture that the current Demon Palace and Divine Palace were split from those ancient sections. Since Di Fan has found the ruins of the ancient sect, it is naturally worth going. The current strength of the Divine Prefecture is still too weak. Hearing this, Dongfang Yu, the army of destruction, and the others all sighed. Xia Jun and Luo Shi were even more dejected. With their talents they would be the best in the earth domain. However, in the heaven domain, where bloodlines dominated, they would be too ordinary without powerful bloodlines. Sensing everyone's dejection, Yi Fei smiled and shook his head. Dongfang Yu, you don't have to worry about bloodlines. I have a few Azura blood beads here. Each of them contains a powerful bloodline. Take them and refine them, then you will have powerful bloodlines. Since Yi Shaochan did not need bloodlines, Yi Fei went with the flow and gave them to his good brothers. Among them, Jing Wushou received the Evil Sword Renzu's level 9 Evil Sword bloodline. Dongfang Yu received Yin Tianjin's Yin Yang bloodline. Xia Jun and Luo Shi received the demonic bloodline of the two Renzu from the nest of 1,000 demons. In the end, only the 1,000 Caves Old Demon was left. Since the 1,000 Caves Old Demon had destroyed himself early, Yi Fei could only condense a trace of his bloodline. He was unable to form a complete Azura blood bead. Yi Fei could not help but feel troubled. I have another bloodline left behind by the Quasi-Emperor, but it is too thin. I am not sure if I can refine it. Who wants it? Chapter 2558. Counterattacking the Sword Palace. However, when they heard that there was only a sliver of the bloodline left and that it was unknown if the fusion would succeed, many people's eyes dimmed. After all, every martial artist only had one chance to fuse the bloodline. If they failed, they would suffer heavy losses. Seeing that no one spoke, Yi Fei shook his head and decided to keep the bloodline. At this time, Lin Tianjiao, who was sitting in the corner, suddenly stood up and said, "Let me do it. All of you have special bloodlines as your foundation. Only I am a descendant of the martial god. I don't have a strong bloodline or talent. Instead of remaining unknown, I might as well give it a shot." Lin Tianjiao, once one of the top 4 geniuses of the northern region, could no longer hold back his desire to become stronger. Yi Fei also understood his feelings. Therefore, although he was a little worried, he still solemnly handed the incomplete Azura blood bead to Lin Tianjiao. "Brother Lin, be careful. If you can't fuse it, don't force it." "I know, I'm just giving it a try." Although he said that, Lin Tianjiao still had a nervous and excited expression on his face when he received the bloodline. The others were both envious and worried at the same time. However, this was Lin Tianjiao's own decision, and no one could interfere. Just like what Lin Tianjiao had said, maybe he would succeed? Seeing that Yi Fei had finished distributing the bloodline, Di Fan, Zhao Qianjun and Fu Renjie walked over. "Yi Fei, the matter in Qingzhou has been settled. We plan to explore that ancient sect again. Do you want to come?" "Of course, but before that we have something to do." Yi Fei nodded, then shook his head. The danger in Qingzhou had passed temporarily. As long as the Sword Palace and the Storm Palace were not destroyed, Qingzhou would always be a threat. However, because of the existence of the Storm Palace, the Crimson Lunar Dynasty was not willing to kill the Storm Palace. Therefore, the only target left for revenge was the Sword Palace. It's time to settle the grudges in the Sword Palace. I should also make a trip to the Deity King's Palace. Thinking of this, Yi Fei felt a little excited. He had promised Zhao Yu that he would flatten the palace of the Divine King and bring Zhao Yu back. Seeing the Yulin forest guards beginning to gather outside the city, Yi Fei felt that it was time. "Senior brother Zhao, wait for me in the Imperial City. I'll be right back." After leaving the restaurant, Yi Fei rushed to the encampment of the Imperial Guards as quickly as he could. He saw that the Quasi-Emperor of Tianfa and the Supreme Dean were waiting there with Rizu and Pan Wang. The slovenly Taoist was also controlling a newly repaired divine pattern puppet, and was talking to Zheng Tai and Renzu about something. When they saw Yi Fei, their spirits were lifted. "Yi Fei, you've come at the right time." We were about to lead the Yulin Forest Guards with Lord Zheng to attack the Sword Palace, but they didn't agree. The slovenly Taoist was very displeased. Zheng Tai and Renzu, on the other hand, had a stiff expression. We were only following orders to resolve the crisis in Qingzhou. We didn't say that we were going to attack the Sword Palace. Yi Fei smiled and stopped the slovenly Taoist. "Senior Sword Demon, since they're not willing, why should we force them? At most, I'll go to the Imperial City again. Gongzhu, order all wizards above the Lord of Heaven to follow me." By the order of the Wizard Emperor, all wizards above the Lord of Heaven are to gather here. Don't, young Master Yi. Let's talk things over. There's no need to go to the Imperial City. I'll discuss with the 4 commanders and see if they can make an exception. However, the cost of sending troops this time, Zheng Tai was in a difficult position. After all, opening the Gate of Divine Essences required a lot of Xian veins, not to mention the thousands of Yulin Forest Guards. When Yi Fei heard this, he smiled but didn't say anything. He just glanced at the void in the distance. A large number of Heaven Monarch Sorcerer Tribe members had already received the order and were rushing over from afar. The human ancestor Zheng Tai's eyelids twitched violently. He did not expect that so many grand sorcerers who had already disappeared were hidden in the small Qing province. Although these sorcerers' realms were very weak, as long as he thought about how Ren Shunguang could perform the heaven and earth sacrifice with just his soul, the human ancestor Zheng Tai's eyelids twitched violently. "Pass down the order. The army is to move out and attack the Sword Palace immediately." Zheng Tai's face was ashen as he roared at the Yulin Forest Guards. The 4 commanders looked at each other and said telepathically, "Lord Zheng, His Majesty didn't seem to have such an order." "How can I not know? But since His Majesty is lending troops to Yi Fei, it shows His Majesty's attitude. Besides, we won't lose anything if we destroy the Sword Palace." Zheng Tai sneered. He was the Emperor of the Ancients' trusted aide. How could he not know what the Emperor of the Ancients was planning? Although the ancient Emperor of the Crimson Moon couldn't attack Yi Fei because he had something on Yi Fei, he wouldn't have lent troops to Yi Fei if there were no benefit. Only Zheng Tai knew that the ancient Emperor of the Crimson Moon was lending troops because he was afraid of Yi Fei's ability to summon the earthly Emperor's spirit. Secondly, he wanted to use Yi Fei to weaken the 10 great powers. After all, the Emperor of the Ancients' authority would only be stronger if the 10 great powers were weaker. Moreover, the Sword Palace was the only one among the 10 great powers that had lost a quasi-emperor. Taking this opportunity to destroy it would only benefit the Crimson Moon Empire. "Yi Fei, have you really decided to destroy the Sword Palace?" The slovenly Taoist had a complicated look in his eyes. His original intention was to use the Yulin Forest Guards to take back control of the Sword Palace. However, Yi Fei had actually destroyed it. "Senior Sword Demon, I know you're upset, but you've seen the current state of the Sword Palace. It's completely rotten from the inside out. Instead of taking back a broken Sword Palace, why don't we demolish the Sword Palace and rebuild it? As the saying goes, there can be no construction without destruction. Only when the Sword Palace is destroyed can it regain its vitality." Yi Fei's expression was resolute. Although the slovenly Taoist was sad, he still sighed and comforted himself when he thought about the disbandment of the Sword Gate and the actions of the Sword Palace. Perhaps Yi Fei is right. The current Sword Palace is no longer the Sword Palace of the past. It really needs to be destroyed and rebuilt. "All Dragonians, follow me." In the end, the slovenly Taoist was still worried. he decided to take the powerful Dragonians and make a trip to the Sword Palace. Yi Fei didn't stop him. He had no choice but to borrow troops from the Crimson Moon Empire. He hadn't forgotten that the 10 great powers of the Divine Prefecture had once joined forces to break into the spiritual realm and destroy the primordial immortal tribe. And the mastermind behind this was very likely the Crimson Moon Empire. Using it now is only for a better revenge in the future, Yi Fei muttered to himself coldly. His words were clearly transmitted by the vegetation beneath his feet. In the deepest part of Tianwu Imperial City, the Celestial Tree Lord's solemn expression turned to one of relief. He didn't say anything else. Instead, he silently retreated into the darkness with the trance behind him. After all the Yulin forest guards had entered the gate, Yi Fei once again adjusted the position of the Gate of Immortal Essences. However, this time, Yi Fei aimed at the City of Divine Kings and the Divine King Palace. After 3 years, I can finally return to the City of Divine Kings. Chapter 2559. Heavenly Messenger. With the end of the Battle of Qingzhou, the defeat of the Sword Palace and the Wind Cloud Palace swept across the entire Divine Land like a hurricane. It also shocked all the forces in the Divine Land. No one had expected that Yi Fei, who was thought to be dead, would suddenly return from the Demon Province. What was even more unexpected was that so many geniuses had gathered in the seemingly small Qingzhou. Of course, the most important thing was that the Red Moon Divine Dynasty had suddenly lent troops to Yi Fei, which made many forces in the Divine Prefecture nervous and suspicious. After all, the current Divine Dynasty only ruled the Divine Prefecture in name, and it had long been divided internally. The so-called top 10 forces were the 10 feudal lords, each ruling a region and enjoying the worship of countless countries. If the ancient Emperor of the Crimson Moon had remained inactive, the top 10 forces could still tolerate it. However, the ancient Emperor of the Crimson Moon had obviously broken the delicate balance within the Divine Land. Your Majesty, the Master of the Yin-Yang Palace just sent news that the Warlord Palace, the Stormy Palace, and the Nalan family have decided to form an alliance. They have also invited the Royal Soldier Mountain. It is said that the Sword Palace is also interested in joining the alliance. Inside the palace, a Renzu reported with his head lowered. It doesn't matter. Let them form an alliance. As for the Sword Palace, they have lost the 9th Heaven Sword Master, a quasi-emperor of Renzu's supreme realm. Now that the evil Sword Renzu is dead, the Sword Palace is doomed. Ancient Emperor Crimson Moon sat on the golden and dazzling dragon throne. His face was old, and a heavy aura of death had already emerged from his body. It was obvious that he didn't have much time left. This was also the reason why ancient Emperor Crimson Moon had repeatedly compromised in the face of the earthly sovereign's heroic spirit. Ancient Emperor Crimson Moon's current state was no longer sufficient for him to face the other ancient emperors, but he was still unwilling to give up. He did not want the power of the Divine Dynasty to fall into the hands of the top 10 forces, and he did not want to die of old age in the ancient Emperor realm. Therefore, he had been plotting. Destroying the Heavenly Palace of Despair was part of his plan. Controlling the Yin-Yang Palace was part of his plan. Lending troops to Yi Fei was also part of his plan. Seeing that the Emperor of the Ancients had made up his mind, Renzu, who was reporting to the Emperor of the Ancients, didn't say anything else. However, he was still a little dissatisfied as he said, "Your Majesty, you have great foresight. However, if we allow Yi Fei to continue growing stronger, even if we take the opportunity to destroy the Sword Palace, we'll only be letting Yi Fei take advantage of us. Haha, raising a tiger will only invite calamity? Don't worry that Yi Fei won't become a tiger. He's just a calf that this emperor is using. The more trouble he makes, the faster he'll die. At that time, Even the earthly Emperor's spirit won't be able to save him. If I'm not wrong, Emperor Sky has already noticed him, Ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon said confidently. Although the ancient emperor was powerful, there were still the ancient gods above him. Emperor Sky was a terrifying existence that was above the divine dynasty. Back then, the earthly emperor had been defeated by Emperor Sky. Ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon didn't believe that Yi Fei would be spared. True strength isn't about how strong one's combat strength is, but how long one can live. The longer one lives, the more hope there is to break through to a higher realm and obtain greater benefit. If I'm not wrong, the Emperor Sky's emissary should be here soon. Boom! Before the ancient Emperor of the Crimson Moon could finish his sentence, a huge space gate appeared above the rolling void. Then, a gorgeous war chariot rushed out from the space gate. A young man in purple armor was driving the war chariot. He crossed the Imperial Palace and landed 10 steps away from the ancient Emperor of the Crimson Moon's throne. Logically speaking, the Divine Dynasty should be furious at such a disrespectful action. However, ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon didn't seem to notice the young man's rudeness. On the contrary, he spoke to the young man as if they were peers. "Welcome, Emperor Sky's emissary. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. Your Majesty, you're too polite. I'm Lu Mo, a subordinate of the Emperor Sky's elder. Today, I'm here on my master's orders to investigate the revival of the ancient god's corpse spirits. Do you know who awakened the corpse spirits? Are they the remnants of the immortal spirits?" Lu Mo's tone was cold. Although he was only in the early Renzu realm, he wasn't afraid of ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon. In fact, he even had a hint of arrogance. This was because he was from the Emperor Sky. To the Emperor Sky, ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon and the entire Scarlet Moon Divine Dynasty were just subordinate. As the saying went, one's status determined one's status. Ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon naturally wouldn't be angry at Lu Mo's coldness. On the contrary, ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon smiled and pointed at Lu Mo, "Emissary Lu, you shouldn't be asking me these questions. Only Tao Lords can enter the land of the ancient god. Even if I wanted to answer, I wouldn't be able to explain it clearly. If I shouldn't be asking you, then who should I be asking?" Lu Mo was a little confused. Ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon smiled. Renzu, who was beside him, suddenly understood and hurriedly passed Yi Fei's portrait to Lu Mo, the emissary of the Emperor Sky. The portrait was so vivid that even Yi Fei's cultivation level could be seen clearly. Lu Mo couldn't help but show contempt. "Early Divine Lord? Who is this person? What's his relationship with the ancient god's corpse spirits?" "It's this person who awakened the ancient god's corpse spirits," Ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon said. Lu Mo's expression changed. "I see. Where is this person now?" "He's just an ordinary Divine Lord. How could he awaken the ancient god's corpse spirits? I suspect that this person might be related to the immortal spirits. We must investigate thoroughly." "Lord Emissary, according to the latest information we received, Yi Fei has already gone to the palace of the King of Gods." Renzu, who was reporting to Lu Mo, saw the hint in ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon's eyes and took out another map. Lu Mo didn't even look at it and shook his head in disdain. "I'm not interested in rushing to a small rural place like the Scarlet Moon Dynasty. Do you have a teleportation gate? Mark the location and bring me there immediately." Renzu, who was reporting to Lu Mo, had an extremely ugly expression when he heard Lu Mo's words. Ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon, on the other hand, acted as if he didn't hear anything and continued to smile. However, compared to Ancient Emperor Scarlet Moon's shrewdness, Divine King Qiu from the Palace of the King of Gods was a little impatient. Not long ago, Warlord Palace had sent news that the Sword Palace had been destroyed by the Imperial Guards. Sword Guardian Renzu had fled with his children, while Divine Sword Niu Hao had led the remaining disciples of the Sword Palace to surrender. They didn't surrender to the Scarlet Moon dynasty, but to the slovenly Taoist and the Draconians. After the battle in Qingzhou, everyone knew that these Draconians were Yi Fei's subordinates. Now that they had destroyed the Sword Palace, they had the ability to contend with the 10 major forces. Although the Azure Province did not have a quasi-emperor overseeing it, if the Scarlet Moon deity dynasty was added in, then no single faction would be able to resist. Palace Lord, what should we do now? If we had known that Yi Mo would be able to come this far and form an alliance with the Divine Dynasty, we wouldn't have sent Zhao Yu to the Imperial Sky so hastily. After all, sending Zhao Yu to the Imperial Sky was both a good and a bad thing. With Zhao Yu's beauty and talent, she would definitely encounter some opportunities in the Imperial Sky. The palace of the King of Gods would also be rewarded by the Imperial Sky. However, this would also offend Yi Fei. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.